Old geezer, you're supposed to stay home. Why are you here, old man? As I headed to the airport for the company trip to Honolulu, a new employee smirked and taunted me. Despite having confirmed my participation, the organizer hadn't prepared my boarding pass. Sorry for the inconvenience. See ya. Ignoring the rebukes of his colleagues, the young man headed to the departure gate, leaving me to sigh and make a phone call. The cheerful young man had no idea yet. He didn't know who I really was, and how this incident would change the course of his life. My name is Mark. I recently turned 50 and experienced my first job change at this age. My new company is a resort management firm. Though the current CEO is the third generation, the company has rapidly grown into a major player in the industry. Due to my age, I joined as a contract employee, but I was grateful to be employed by such a large company. The department I was assigned to was full of young, energetic people. Despite being significantly older than my colleagues, they never showed any sign of discomfort, always ready to help and support each other. It's a very positive work environment. 3 months into my new job, April has arrived. Although I was still busy settling in myself, a new employee joined us. Nice to meet you all. I'm Andy, looking forward to working with you. Andy, a handsome young man, joined our department. Though I'm not sure about these things at my age, he probably falls into the good-looking category by society's standards. With distinct features and a fresh appearance, he seemed promising. Standing next to him was another department's manager, Tony. Actually, Andy is my nephew. Please take care of him. It turned out Andy was a classic case of nepotism. Tony's introduction left our colleagues a bit confused, but they responded politely. Despite his connections, Andy seemed bright and communicative. He seemed capable and quick to grasp things, so I thought he would learn the job quickly. However, that assumption was soon shattered. Hey Andy, weren't you supposed to finish this by today? Was I? I don't recall hearing that. I told you this morning. The deadline was also in the internal email. Oh, I didn't see it. Sorry. Sorry doesn't cut it. We need to contact the client now. Well, there's nothing I can do, so I'll leave it to you. What? Andy. What? I apologized. But isn't it a senior's job to fix a junior's mistakes? Are you serious? The exchange between Andy and his female supervisor left the department in shock. You know, if you say anything to me, who knows what Tony will say? You might even get fired. Andy, who had initially been bright and eager, revealed his true colors within a month, using Tony's name as a shield for his arrogant behavior. He behaved arrogantly towards everyone, pushed his mistakes and menial tasks onto his seniors, and left promptly at the end of the workday. The remaining employees were left to clean up his mess and work overtime. The female employee, unsure how to respond to the mention of Tony's name, hesitated. Well then, I'll leave it to you. See you tomorrow. Andy said with a triumphant grin as he stood up. Andy. I couldn't help but call out to him, placing a hand on his shoulder. What is it? That's enough, don't you think? Ha? Sure, it's a senior's job to help a junior fix their mistakes. But, Andy, you forgot the deadline, right? Shouldn't you be the one to apologize to the client first? Ha? The senior's help comes after that. First, you need to apologize properly, Andy. I tried to gently admonish Andy, but it didn't get through to him. What's with you, acting all high and mighty for an old man? He muttered this and quickly left. Mark, I'm sorry. No, I'm the one who should apologize. I tried to be careful with my words, but it seems they didn't have any effect. No, thank you for addressing Andy. He doesn't listen to me at all, probably because I'm a woman. Hearing the female employee's sigh, I pondered what to do next. However, from the next day, Andy seemed to hold a grudge against me for reprimanding him and started challenging me. Hey, I heard you're a new employee just like me, old man? He somehow learned that I had joined the company not long before him and began mocking me. Andy, even if we are both new employees. Yeah, I get it. Just shut up, you old geezer. Anytime I tried to say something, he'd cut me off with a laugh, refusing to listen. This behavior extended to other employees as well, as he started openly using Tony's name and acting even more arrogantly, to the point where colleagues began whispering about his unbearable conduct. Time passed with this kind of atmosphere, and the company planned a trip for the employees. The destination was Hawaii. It was a trip partly to scout a new branch location. Traditionally, the newest employees were in charge of organizing the trip. Andy. Yes? I plan to join the company trip. Sure, got it. I informed Andy, who was the organizer for our department, about my participation. To my surprise, he accepted it with a smile. I had expected to be mocked for wanting to join the trip as an old man, but his reaction was unexpectedly positive. Although this put me at ease, I felt a bit suspicious. Perhaps something good had happened, putting him in a good mood. Despite my concerns, I didn't want to create unnecessary trouble, so I convinced myself it was fine. However, on the day of the trip, I headed to the airport at the scheduled meeting time. Seeing me, Andy laughed mockingly. "Why are you here, old man?" "What? I told you I was joining, didn't I?" "Oh, did you?" Andy, unable to hide his grin, finally burst out laughing. "Sorry, my bad. I must have misunderstood. I didn't think an old man like you would want to go to Hawaii, so I didn't get you a ticket." However, Andy continued laughing, as if finding the whole situation amusing. "Old geezers like you should stay behind and work." "What? Ha, it's hilarious that you came all the way here thinking you could join. What a joke. You should have double-checked." I rushed to the counter to see if there was anything they could do, but the flight was fully booked. And all other flights were also full due to the holiday. I had no choice but to give up on the trip. As Andy had said, I should have double-checked. Given his usual behavior, I should have anticipated that he might pull something like this. His cheerful demeanor was probably due to his anticipation of this prank. I had been fooled. That's the simple truth. Feeling defeated, I returned to find that other colleagues had been reprimanding Andy. "Andy, this was too much. It's not funny. Yeah, this isn't just a joke. We all heard Mark tell you he was joining, and you acknowledged it. You did this on purpose, didn't you? Come on, it was just a little mistake by a new employee." "Oh, hey, old man. Did you find a seat?" "No, right? It's a holiday weekend, after all. Sorry for the trouble." "Well then, see you later." Andy, still smirking, headed towards the security checkpoint, leaving me behind. Though my colleagues expressed their concern, there was nothing to be done with no seats available. "Don't worry about me, just enjoy the trip." "Mark. I'm so sorry. We should have double-checked as well." "It's okay. Look, you all should get going. Time is running out. We really are sorry. We'll make sure to talk to Andy about this. And we'll bring you back lots of souvenirs. Really, don't worry about it." "Thank you. Have a great trip." I saw them off with a smile. After they left, I sat on a bench near the departure gate and pulled out my phone. After making a call, I grabbed the handle of my suitcase. Half a day later, I was sitting in a hotel lobby, drinking coffee with my wife, Nancy. Suddenly, I heard a commotion and looked up to see my colleagues entering the lobby. "Mark?" Someone noticed me and several of them voiced their surprise. Among them, Andy was particularly shocked and quickly ran over to me. "What are you doing here? How are you even here?" He pointed his finger at me. His loud questioning drew the attention of everyone in the lobby. "Andy, it's inappropriate to raise your voice in public," I said, standing up and lowering his hand. "Didn't your parents teach you not to point at people?" "Ha? That's not important right now. Why are you here?" He spat, practically foaming at the mouth in frustration. Just then, someone rushed over and forcibly made Andy bow his head. "I'm terribly sorry. Truly, I'm sorry. Executive Director. Mark, please forgive us." "What? Executive Director? Tony, what are you talking about?" "Andy, shut up." "Mark, this is all my fault for not properly educating him. I sincerely apologize." It was Tony who had made him bow. Hearing Tony's words, the others turned to look at me. What? Executive director? Mark? But I thought he was a contract employee. What's going on? Everyone started murmuring. No way. The executive director you were talking about is. Yes, it's Mark. No way. But he's just a new employee like me, right? Andy, even now, you dare to speak like that. Mark. I apologize again. Please forgive us. Andy looked at me with disbelief in his eyes, and I returned his gaze silently. What's all this commotion about? Mr. Johnson, good to see you. Mr. Johnson, the CEO, appeared. Oh, Nancy, it's been a while. Indeed, it has. Thank you for always taking care of Mark. I'm sorry for any trouble this has caused. No, it's nothing at all. Sorry for any worry we caused. Please, take it easy and enjoy your time in Hawaii. Thank you for your kindness. Mark, I'm sorry about this. No need to worry. I actually appreciate you letting me bring Nancy along. Thank you. No problem. It was good that you contacted me directly. As I chatted warmly with Mr. Johnson alongside Nancy, one of the employees timidly approached. Mr. Johnson? Can I ask you something? Sure, what is it? Is it true that Mark is an executive director? Oh, I see, I hadn't informed everyone. Yes, this is Mark, our executive director. He used to be the manager of a famous hotel in Hawaii and we were classmates in college. When we started a new project, I knew I had to bring him on board, so I personally recruited him. Officially, he's been working as a contract employee to get a feel for the company's atmosphere and identify any issues. So, that's what it was. Yes. Mark even volunteered to guide this company trip. When I heard he didn't have a boarding pass, I had him join me on my private jet. I had lived in Hawaii for many years. After getting married here, my wife and I had a special connection to the place. When I told Kyle, the CEO, that I was returning to Japan, Nancy decided to come with me despite her initial hesitation. It was our first time back in Hawaii in a while. I had offered to guide the company trip myself, and not showing up would have caused trouble. So, right after leaving the airport, I called Kyle. Nancy, who was supposed to come on a later flight, ended up joining me on the private jet. Since we hadn't done any sightseeing upon arrival, we reached the hotel before my colleagues. Andy, is it? Yes, Mr. Johnson. Mark had informed you that he was participating, yet you didn't arrange a boarding pass? I've heard from other employees that you did this deliberately. Why? I'm sorry. I'm asking for the reason. And you should apologize to Mark, not me. Andy hesitated before beginning to speak in a low voice. It turned out he was jealous that, despite starting around the same time, I was relied upon by everyone. And when I was reprimanded for my attitude, it made me even angrier. You behaved poorly because you used your Uncle Tony's name to act arrogantly, right? Kyle pressed him further, which surprised Tony even more. Andy. What does that mean? Tony demanded, stepping closer. Apparently, Tony had been unaware that Andy was using his name as a shield. After hearing from other employees about Andy's various misdeeds, Tony reprimanded him harshly and apologized to everyone. I'm truly sorry. I don't have any authority over personnel decisions and certainly can't fire anyone. It was all fabricated by Andy. It's my fault for neglecting him, thinking he was doing fine. I'll make sure to discipline him strictly from now on. Please don't give up on him. I'm very sorry for causing such discomfort to everyone. Andy, apologize to everyone. I'm very sorry, Andy stammered. I deeply apologize for causing such a commotion, Mr. Johnson. Tony, gripping Andy by the collar and glaring at him fiercely, made Andy shrink back in fear. Though it was his own fault, Andy was thoroughly intimidated. I'll decide their punishment later. For now, everyone, please enjoy the trip, Mr. Johnson said, clapping his hands a few times to lighten the mood. The tension eased, and everyone visibly relaxed. The next morning, despite the lingering sleepiness from jet lag, we climbed Diamond Head, an optional activity for those interested. The trail had rest areas and railings, making it accessible. Even those who didn't seem particularly fit were enjoying the climb. After about 40 minutes of hiking, we reached the summit after climbing the final stairs. Everyone gasped in awe. "Wow, it's so beautiful. This is amazing." To the west, we saw the cityscape of Waikiki, to the east, Hanauma Bay and the nearby Coco Head. To the north was the famous Tantalus Hill, and looking south, the vast Pacific Ocean stretched endlessly. The 360-degree view from the summit was breathtaking, leaving everyone speechless. Those visiting Hawaii for the first time were particularly moved. Among them, Andy stood out, eyes wide with amazement. We continued to enjoy traditional Hawaiian activities, including beach outings and shopping at Ala Moana Center. However, throughout the trip, Andy seemed pensive, deep in thought. I considered checking on him, wondering if he was feeling unwell, but worried that speaking to him might only provoke him. That night, we went stargazing, lying on the grass to gaze at the expansive night sky. Seeing a sky full of stars, which couldn't been seen in Japan, deeply moved everyone, and I was glad they could experience Hawaii's charm. Glancing at Andy, I noticed him quietly crying while looking at the stars. "Andy, can I talk to you for a moment?" "Huh?" I led him to a secluded spot and handed him a handkerchief. "You've had a gloomy face all day. Did something happen?" "No, it's just that spending the day experiencing Hawaii's amazing nature and interacting with people. I was enchanted by the different pace and the warmth of the locals. It made me realize how vast the world is and how small I am. Watching the stars tonight, I was overwhelmed with emotions, and before I knew it, I was crying uncontrollably." "Andy." "Mark." "Yes? I've said and done terrible things to you and everyone else. I'm truly sorry. I realized how shallow and pathetic I've been. Fixating on trivial matters and letting jealousy cloud my judgment. I know it's too late to apologize, and I don't expect forgiveness. But I want to sincerely apologize. I'm really sorry. Andy. It's enough that you understand. If you convey those feelings, everyone will understand too." I decided to accept Andy's heartfelt apology. The next day, Nancy and I went to visit our daughter, Lily. When we returned to Japan, Nancy came with me, but Lily chose to stay in Hawaii with her husband and child. She now runs a cafe. Lily. Dad. Mom. At the cafe, we found Lily, tan from the Hawaiian sun, and our 3-year-old granddaughter, Emily. Emily. It's been a while. It's Grandpa and Grandma. Although Emily usually speaks English, she can also converse in Japanese because Lily speaks it. At first, she looked puzzled upon seeing our faces after such a long time. But when she heard the words Grandpa and Grandma, she broke into a big smile and ran over to us. Grandpa. Grandma. Lily's husband, with his deep-set features, made Emily look quite different from us. But her small hands hugging us tightly and her growth over the past year brought tears to my eyes. Grandpa. Grandma. I missed you. I love you. Thank you. We missed you too, Emily. We love you. The phrase "cherish as if they were your own eyes" must have been coined for moments like this. Everything about her was incredibly precious and lovable. We enjoyed a meal together, relishing the time spent with Emily. About 15 minutes later, as Emily went to the restroom, a few familiar faces entered the cafe. Oh, Mark. Hey, did you all come for a meal? Yes, we heard this place is great. Well, it is. My daughter runs this place. Make yourselves at home. Really? That makes it even more exciting. Among them was Andy. After the previous incident, he went around apologizing to his other colleagues, promising to never again display such arrogant behavior. He was forgiven on the condition that he sincerely dedicate himself to his work. Today, it seemed he had been invited to join for a meal. He looked both nervous and excited. Lily led them to a table. Meanwhile, Emily came running back from the restroom and nearly fell. Instinctively, Andy caught her. Emily looked up at him and said, "Thank you," then, staring at him, her face turned bright red. Emily, are you okay? Andy, thank you for helping her. She's my granddaughter. It's nothing. Are you okay, Emily? Did you get hurt? Unexpectedly, Andy gently spoke to Emily. Then Emily, looking completely enchanted, exclaimed, "Danny." She hugged Andy tightly. What? Emily? Emily, let go of him. You're troubling Andy. No. Danny. It seemed Emily had developed a crush on Andy for rescuing her and didn't want to let go. Hearing the commotion, Lily's husband came out and tried to help pull Emily off Andy, but Emily clung to him, pressing her face against him and refusing to let go. Andy, though troubled, seemed to understand that he couldn't just pry a small child away. He gently patted Emily's head, and I couldn't help but quip, "Andy, I won't forgive you for this." What I meant was, how dare you charm Emily? But somehow Andy misunderstood. I will follow you, Mark. I've turned over a new leaf. I respect you. Even if you don't forgive me, I won't give up. He responded, missing the point entirely. I could only hold my head in my hands. Nancy and Lily burst into laughter at our exchange, and the situation became uncontrollable. In the end, Lily kicked both Andy and me out of the cafe, saying we were disrupting business. Emily's exclamation of "Danny" echoed in my ears. Despite this small incident, the company trip concluded successfully. We all returned to Japan. And I started working in earnest as an executive director, not just as a contract employee. I was put in charge of a new hotel project in Hawaii. As an executive director, I became the project leader and had a team of subordinates. Among them was Andy, who had volunteered for the position. Although still a new employee with many menial tasks, I worried he might cause trouble again. However, he seemed genuinely reformed, working diligently without complaint, showing great potential. However, thinking about Emily always brought a hint of frustration. I won't let Emily marry him. I often thought to myself, feeling a bit possessive. But Andy's admiring gaze was unwavering. And I was the only one feeling this one-sided rivalry. A few years later, we successfully opened the hotel in Hawaii, and Andy, now a promising young employee, was assigned to work there. Since that time, Andy had not caused any problems and had stayed true to his promise of working sincerely. His dedication earned him increasingly responsible roles, and before I knew it, he was on the verge of a major promotion. At Andy's farewell party, he approached me. "Mark." "Yes?" "What's up?" "I owe everything to you. Being able to go to Hawaii, having this farewell party. It's all thanks to you. Thank you so much. Come on. You're going to Hawaii and having this party because you worked hard and changed. It's your own merit. Be confident. Thank you." That company trip to Hawaii completely changed my perspective on life. Even though all my problems were self-inflicted, you comforted me instead of condemning me. Your kindness moved me, and I decided I wanted to follow you. You've taught me so much since then. Never giving up on me despite my terrible behavior. You were the first to really confront me, and I owe you everything. Thank you so much. Seeing the sincerity in Andy's eyes, I no longer saw the arrogant young man he once was. I also had my life changed in Hawaii. You did? Yes. The vast nature and the slow pace of life felt incredibly luxurious. That time, I stayed for only 2 nights. But it made me realize how small my worries and jealousy were. It inspired me to work in Hawaii, hoping to share that experience with others. That's how I got into the hotel business. I see. People who come to Hawaii all have smiles on their faces. Even those who arrive looking gloomy come back with bright smiles after stepping outside. It's an incredible transformation, don't you think? Yes. I felt the same way. Everyone is captivated by Hawaii. That's why I believe you'll succeed in this new venture, Andy. I've taught you everything I know, so go out there and do your best. Yes. Thank you. Oh, I forgot to mention one thing. What? I'm also retiring early and moving to Hawaii. What? I need to keep an eye on you and make sure you don't make a move on my granddaughter. Plus, I want to see you succeed up close. I was entirely serious, but Andy started laughing, then began to cry. "I'll do my best," he responded with a tearful smile, and I nodded warmly. After the farewell party, Andy moved to Hawaii. And I retired and also relocated there. One evening, I sat at home with a beer, gazing at the stars. I felt a bit guilty for dragging Nancy along, but she was enthusiastic about the move. Nancy, who had always loved Hawaii, quickly started looking for a house near Lily's place, which made me laugh. We successfully moved near Lily's house and were now enjoying a leisurely lifestyle. The vast night sky stretched out above me, and I felt a deep sense of joy knowing that someone might be looking at this same sky and having their life perspective changed. The hotel business was beginning to thrive, gaining a great reputation, and Andy was reportedly doing well. His English, which was rough at first, had improved to the point where he could handle daily conversations and work-related discussions. His occasional messages were filled with the challenges and joys of his work. It had been a life full of various experiences. But I had no regrets about anything I had done. And even though I had retired, there was still so much life ahead of me. There were still new discoveries to be made. With Emily and Andy, and many things I still wanted to do and try. Oh, this is rare. Stargazing with a drink? Just for a change. Nancy sat down next to me. She poured herself a beer and we quietly toasted. "Something on your mind?" "Just thinking about Andy." "Oh, Andy? You've always had a special interest in him." "Yeah, I was just thinking I need to keep him away from Emily." "Are you still holding a grudge about that?" "Emily will have many experiences in her life. She'll probably just see Andy as one of those memories." "I hope you're right. When someone experiences a life-changing moment, like Andy did, their actions can determine their future. I'm glad Andy realized that back then. I genuinely believe that." As I finished my beer, I hoped that if Andy ever encountered someone like his former self in his work, he would be the one to help them. I felt a sense of peace as I thought about the future. Someone like you isn't fit for such a big business deal. Leave it to me. After my first big opportunity was snatched away by Mike, I stood there dumbfounded. What's this? Clearly underprepared. How could you even think of negotiating with our company like this? Despite my sleepless nights preparing for this negotiation, it all seemed to be in vain. I bit my lip and gently touched the watch that was my father's keepsake. Hey, that watch is. The president, Mr. Smith's eyes widened. This became my turning point. My name is James. Raised by a single father, my mother had passed away when I was very young. But my father made up for her absence by showering me with love, so I never felt lonely or dissatisfied. I had only seen my mother in photographs, but my father always spoke of her as truly kind and loving. She died from an illness when I was just 2 years old. The woman in the photographs was strikingly beautiful, and my father always seemed a bit sad yet fond when he talked about her. My father was incredibly capable, never missing a school event and always cooking simple yet delicious meals every day. He was a man of few words but always watched over me and respected what I wanted to do. Father, I want to try this. At that, he would agree in a heartbeat and let me take on various activities. Swimming, baseball, piano, languages. I really got to try it all. Looking back, I realize how fortunate I was. We were neither wealthy nor poor. We lived a life without luxuries but also without wants, thanks to my father. While I was at school, he appeared to go to work, but he mainly worked from home to spare me the loneliness. Sitting next to him in the living room and doing my homework as he worked, I felt grown up. It was nothing more than imitating my working father, but it made me sit up straight, feeling like we were in it together. My father would smile and work while watching me. I loved these moments after dinner. James, never forget your manners. He would often say. Manners will definitely save you one day. Always be courteous, no matter whom you're dealing with. This was something he emphasized time and again, and indeed, he was always gentle and polite with everyone. His circle was always full of smiles, and people were eager to help him, and I received much help from those around us as well. My father was the coolest adult I knew, full of manly virtue, and I idolized him. Seeing me trying to emulate him, my father would blush and say, I'm not that great. But having my son look up to me is the ultimate reward as a father. Thanks for making me into a respectable father. Your mother in heaven must be looking at us with envy, he added. There was only one time my father hit me. In elementary school, a classmate mocked me for being from a single-parent home and insulted my father as well. Angered, I retaliated against the classmate. When my teacher told my father, he slapped me hard across the face, tears brimming in his eyes. It was the first and last time I saw my father cry or hit me. Seeing me, Mrs. Miller hurriedly intervened. James loves you very much and just lost his temper because his friend made fun of you. I've already settled things with the other child's parents. Is that so? You were defending me. But listen, James, never do this again. Understand, my father firmly cautioned me. Then apologized deeply to Mrs. Miller and the other parents and silently led me away by the hand. I still remember that day. On the way home, my father gripped my hand painfully tight and said softly, James, I'm sorry. Not having your mother must have made things hard for you. I always saw my father as a towering figure, but on that day, he seemed a bit smaller. And I vowed never to retaliate against any injustices from then on. By adhering to my father's teachings and treating everyone with respect and courtesy, most injustices eventually disappeared. Indeed, by being courteous, my reputation among seniors and teachers improved, and things began to work in my favor. I started to understand why there were always smiles around my father and why everyone was willing to help us. James is such a hard worker and always tries his best, which makes us want to support him, my teachers and seniors would say, helping me to have a pleasant life as a middle school student. During the summer break, just as I was about to enter high school, my father passed away. It was a traffic accident on the way home. Despite having seen him off as usual that morning, I didn't know what to do when my father returned home in such a changed state. Suddenly, I felt as if I was left alone in the world. Everything before me went dark. The only thing left in my hands was the watch my father always wore with care. James, this is a one-of-a-kind watch given to me by a comrade in arms, he had said. He always looked at it with a smile and promised to give it to me when I became an adult. Dad, when I become an adult, I'll wear this watch with care, I had promised. It was routine to carefully wipe it down before going to school every day. During my 3 years in high school, I managed to get by with various part-time jobs. Everyone at my part-time jobs was kind, and I lived each day desperately with the help of those around me. I immersed myself in work to drown out my sorrow. If I kept busy with studies and work, I could forget the sad things. Convinced of this, I made sure not to take any days off. James, don't push yourself too hard. Emily, who had known me since childhood and lived next door, would say worriedly as she sometimes brought over homemade dishes. Emily, thank you. I'm fine. I enjoy both my job and my studies, I would reply. Is that so? Emily would look at me worriedly. To her eyes, I probably looked pitiful. Back then, I was putting on a brave face, but in reality, I was still dragging along the sadness of losing my father. It would be a lie to say I wasn't envious of my friends who played with friends or were devoted to sports. But I was desperate to live, and until I could be proud in front of my father. I vowed to the watch that I wouldn't complain and kept pushing myself in both my studies and jobs. I realized that attending college was out of the question, so I wanted to study as much as possible here. My father, who had only graduated high school, sometimes expressed a slight regret about not attending college. James, do you like studying? Not particularly, but learning new things is fun. Young me answered, and my father, smiling, continued. When you become an adult, you might not be able to study even if you want to. I regret not studying a bit more seriously when I was a student. That was a bit difficult for me as an elementary school student to understand. But now that my father was gone, going to college seemed difficult. Now in high school, this might be my last chance to really learn. James, are you planning to work after graduation? Mr. Thompson, my high school teacher, understanding my situation, started discussing job options with me early. A guy as serious and capable in studies as you could succeed in any college. It's a pity. Despite saying this, he always helped me think about job opportunities. I was truly grateful. I cherished the kindness from those around me and lived each day to the fullest. Gradually, instead of dwelling on my grief, I became motivated to live in a way that wouldn't disgrace my father. The words I spoke to the picture of my father and mother became more and more forward-looking. With help from those around me, I landed a job at a company that seemed too good for a high school graduate. I must do well and not disgrace those who helped me get here. Dad, I'm taking the watch with me. On the first day at the company, I took the keepsake watch and wore it. From that day on, I worked desperately every day with my father's watch as my talisman. Hey, you, the high school grad. Handle this. My supervisor, Mike, would carelessly throw documents onto my desk, which I carefully organized and reviewed. The work environment wasn't bad. Except for this supervisor. Everyone else instructed me politely, treating me as a full-fledged employee without favoritism despite my high school diploma. Although it was challenging at first, it was truly gratifying to be given real responsibilities and not be looked down upon as just a high school graduate. Only Mike never recognized me as a full-fledged employee, always assigning me menial tasks. It was just the beginning, I thought. For now, I must endure. I truly believed that someday Mike would recognize me. With that belief, I obeyed even Mike. Indeed, Mike always topped the sales charts and was deeply trusted by the front office. He was capable at his job, and I thought I could learn something from him, so I persisted without getting discouraged. Hey, high school grad. Why are you even in this company? Every day, like clockwork, Mike would hurl insults at me. Indeed, this company mostly employed college graduates, and the number of high school grads like myself could be counted on one hand. And one by one, unable to withstand Mike's bullying, they would leave. I could sometimes hear the office ladies whispering. Did you hear? Another high school kid quit. Yeah, it's Mike, right? He looks down on everyone because he's from a prestigious school. The last one who quit was a college grad too, but not from a very prestigious one, and he really gave it to her. You're either elite or you don't belong here. Mike would say, currying favor with the bosses but being cruel to those he considered beneath him. James, it's amazing how you can stand him. I just can't handle it anymore. A college-educated coworker said before quitting. Within less than 6 months, all my peers had quit, and I was the only one left. Ha, tough little guy. At least you've got grit. Mike would snort disdainfully, continuing to assign me menial tasks and snide remarks, but as I endured and handled them, my reputation among others began to grow. James, want to try handling this task? I think you're ready for it now, someone suggested. James, want to come along on this deal? It'll be a great experience for you, another offered. Gradually, I was entrusted with bigger responsibilities and allowed to accompany on major negotiations, getting direct exposure and learning opportunities. However, somehow I always ended up being replaced midway through these tasks. At first, I thought it was due to my own inadequacies and seriously reflected on what might have gone wrong. But as Mike frequently ended up taking over, I began to feel something was off. Surely not. The unpleasant thought crossed my mind, but there was no proof. It could just be a coincidence. Perhaps I truly was lacking, and Mike was just cleaning up after me. I shook my head, dismissing the troubling thoughts. Indeed, Mike was unpleasant. But blaming my shortcomings on others wouldn't help me grow. I continued to focus on self-improvement with a positive attitude. I motivated myself with the goal of someday handling an entire negotiation on my own from start to finish. James, this is a crucial deal for the company. Can I entrust it to you? One day, 5 years after I joined the company, President, Mr. Carter directly assigned me a significant negotiation. Yes. I'll do my utmost. This was certainly my turning point. I spared no effort in my preparations, working tirelessly to approach the negotiation well prepared. I communicated thoroughly with the sales representative, ensuring the materials were clear and comprehensive to avoid any oversights. Wow, James. You're doing even better than I taught you. As I prepared with guidance and advice from many, the day of the negotiation finally arrived. A kid like you handling such a big deal? You're in over your head. Step aside, Mike said, taking the materials I had prepared. Then he reported to Mr. Carter, I'm concerned about relying solely on him, so I'll accompany him. And it was decided that Mike would join the negotiation. This gave me an uneasy feeling. The unpleasant scenario that had once crossed my mind was about to become reality. On the day of the negotiation, Mike and I headed to the meeting in a taxi together. Despite the significance of what we were about to undertake, the ride was silent throughout. "Hey, high school grad, I'll handle this. Just watch and learn," Mike said tersely before entering the conference room. Inside, the president, Mr. Smith, was waiting. As the negotiation progressed, Mike took charge of the conversation. However, he began deviating from the materials, and the discussion became disjointed, never quite coming together. The conversation veered off in directions I hadn't intended, and I didn't get a chance to speak at all. Seeing the increasingly grim expressions of the people from the client company, I clenched my jaw in frustration. It felt as though all my efforts had been wasted, leaving me feeling helpless. Driven by his panic at the disarray, Mike's discourse strayed further from the core issues. Amidst deep sighs and bored tapping on the table, Mike's verbose talking turned him into a virtual jester. "Really, what is this? It seems this negotiation was a waste of time." Mr. Smith finally expressed his frustration. "I'm terribly sorry." In the ensuing silence, I instinctively apologized. "I thought the documents were well prepared and clear, what a pity." He sighed deeply, glancing my way momentarily. Mr. Smith looked at my watch and exclaimed, You? James, was it? Where is that watch from?" Pointing to my watch with trembling hands, he asked. "Yes, my name is James. This watch was a keepsake from my father." "Could it be your father was David?" "Yes, my father was David." "Did you know him?" After a moment of thought, Mr. Smith looked intently into my face again, as if seeing it anew, and said, "I see. Ah, James. You're David's son?" "I apologize if I'm mistaken, but did you prepare these documents?" "Yes," I replied. "In that case, could you give the presentation from your perspective once more?" While somewhat bewildered, I remembered the story of my father's watch, a unique treasure given by a comrade. I was shaken. But I had been given another chance. Mike sat next to me, his face ashen. Taking a deep breath, I delivered the presentation as practiced. It went well, I believe. I engaged sincerely with the client, who listened intently. The Q&A session was efficient and thorough. As I concluded the presentation filled with a sense of achievement, Mike clicked his tongue softly, looking at me with displeasure. Mr. Smith approached with applause, extending his hand for a handshake. "Well done, you put together a solid presentation. Thank you very much." I shook hands with Mr. Smith, and we successfully sealed the deal. "You seem to work much like your father did," he continued, sharing a bit about my father. "It's hard to believe now, but my company once struggled financially. Your father, David, saved us during that crisis. He was truly my right-hand man, tirelessly dedicated to the company. Even after he started his own business, we remained good friends and business partners. He even had this unique watch made especially. My father always cherished this watch, saying it was a unique treasure given by a comrade," I explained. "Is that so?" "David said that." Mr. Smith held back tears. We truly lost a great man. A brief silence enveloped us. "Let's have dinner together sometime soon," he suggested, and with that, we left his company. Upon returning to our company, I learned that Mike had already reported to Mr. Carter. It's good I was there. I managed to secure the deal. It seems he is still not quite ready to handle such responsibilities alone. I will take over this project. I couldn't believe my ears. Mr. Carter also said, "If that's the case, let's leave it to Mike." You really did well. The uneasy feeling I had experienced wasn't just my imagination. When my suspicions turned into certainty, Mike was smirking. "You think I'd actually let someone like you take the credit?" he whispered snidely as he passed by. Perhaps it was too soon for James, Mr. Carter said, looking disappointed. I could only stand there, dumbfounded. After finishing his report, a colleague rushed over. "Hey! What's going on? Why is that project credited to Mike?" All I could do was give a weak smile. "That guy," my colleague muttered bitterly before walking away. It seemed I wasn't the only victim. Despite everything, Mike continued to go out on business deals, further enhancing his sales performance. I had come to understand his scheme. "Mike, why do you go to such lengths?" I confronted him. "Ha? It's too much for a high school grad like you. I'm cleaning up after you, and you're acting all high and mighty? So, every time the project was handed over to you midway, was it all for that?" Mike laughed through his nose without a hint of shame. "What can a useless high school grad do? Just stick to the menial tasks." He waved his hand dismissively and walked away. Frustrated, I punched the wall. Why hadn't I noticed before? No, I had noticed, but I had chosen to ignore it. After that, no significant deals came my way. I grew increasingly disillusioned with the endless trivial tasks. "Hey James, you've been called to the reception room. There's a visitor, you better hurry." One day, after being informed by a senior colleague, I rushed to the reception room. When I entered the reception room after knocking, there were Mr. Carter, Mr. Smith, and a pale-faced Mike. "I apologize for keeping you waiting, Mr. Smith, it's been a while," I said. Mr. Smith, who had a somewhat angry expression, softened a bit when he saw me. "James, it's been a while. I heard you've been ill, how are you feeling now?" "Ill?" I wondered. "No, as you can see, I'm quite well," I replied. Mr. Smith nodded and then glanced briefly at Mike. "You know, I thought I had agreed to a deal based on your presentation. But after that, only this man Mike came to our company." Mike was trembling. When I asked him, he told me that you had been ill for a while, and the responsibility had been shifted to him, Mr. Smith continued. Mr. Carter frowned at the ashen-faced Mike, pressing him for an explanation. While Mike stuttered through his defense, Mr. Smith went on. "If he is to continue to be in charge of the deal, I must say I cannot trust him, and would like to consider this deal void." Mr. Carter apologized profusely and instructed his secretary to review all of Mike's projects. "Mr. Smith, if you would permit me, could you possibly continue the deal with me as the responsible party?" I asked boldly. Mr. Smith nodded approvingly. "I am strict. I'm expecting a lot from your work," he said before leaving. Subsequently, an internal investigation brought all of Mike's credit stealing to light. As expected, other young employees had also been victims of Mike's credit stealing, and in some egregious cases. He hadn't even attended any meetings yet had altered documents to replace names with his own. Damn, why did that old fool have to meddle? And don't get too comfortable, you only got that deal through connections. Mike spat bitterly, his face flushed with anger, as he was relegated to a subsidiary on a remote island. Due to the small size of the island, the reason for his demotion had quickly spread, and he was evidently feeling very constricted. "Well done, James. It really was right to have you in charge," said Mr. Smith, with whom I had multiple meetings and dinners, earning his full trust. After numerous meetings and dinners with Mr. Smith, I earned his complete trust. Our mutual efforts led to improved business performance and even new deals introduced by Mr. Smith. "Thank you always. About that matter you introduced last time. Now, he was like a second father to me, and I often sought his advice over meals." After the incident, Mr. Carter apologized, saying, "I was so blinded by my trust in Mike that I neglected other employees. How shameful. I am truly sorry." This led to a re-evaluation of all employees, making the workplace more conducive than ever. Along with that, while not as extreme as Mike, other senior employees who had been coasting on the efforts of juniors were sidelined, eventually leaving the company. The environment became more dynamic, with fair recognition of efforts, fostering healthy competition and improved performance. Consequently, I was promoted swiftly. It was gratifying to see that effort was fairly rewarded, and by closely coordinating with clients, the results multiplied. This cycle led to even more business opportunities. Lately, I've been able to assign more responsibilities to juniors and subordinates. It's a shame that James is stepping back, but his successor is a really great person. Recently, I've been hearing this more often and have found joy in personnel development. However, I remain to be in charge of Mr. Smith's company. Thank you for taking your time despite your busy schedule. I shared a laugh with him, because you are my benefactor in origin, but perhaps I should pass it on for the sake of my juniors. Our dealings with Mr. Smith led me to discover more about my father, and it was after that deal that my work was reevaluated. I couldn't bear to turn my back on Mr. Smith. By the way, James, with your skills, you could go independent, couldn't you? Have you not considered it? Mr. Smith inquired one day, seemingly under the impression that, like my father, I might do the same. I haven't ruled it out, I admitted, but there was still a desire to contribute to the current company. Despite the challenges, this company had nurtured me from a high school graduate to where I was now. At least until the subordinates I'm training can stand on their own, I think I'll stay, I added. Mr. Smith smiled warmly. That's another way you resemble your father, he remarked, apparently reminiscing and seeing my father in me. There was one thing that particularly piqued my curiosity, prompting me to ask Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith, have I become the kind of man like my father who you respected in? Is there a doctor here? The panicked voice of the flight attendant echoed through the plane on my way home. Looking back, I saw an elderly woman collapsed in her seat. But I hesitated to raise my hand. I was once praised as having a gifted hands, but now my name is infamous. Maybe someone like me, exiled from the medical community, doesn't deserve to help. Just then, a middle-aged man declared, "I'm a doctor," and approached her. Relieved, I watched, but his incorrect treatment made me panic. I reluctantly said, "Well, I'm a doctor, too," and stepped in. When I grow up, I want to marry a doctor. My childhood friend said this when we were in elementary school. Why a doctor? My mom says if we marry a doctor, we'll be set for life. Back then, I didn't know what set for life meant, but I thought that if I became a doctor, I'd marry her. I decided to become a doctor. And at that moment, I confessed my feelings to her. So, I started studying hard to get into medical school. But suddenly I, who didn't have particularly good grades, declared that I wanted to become a doctor. People around me were astounded and said, "Don't joke around." Even my parents, instead of being supportive or happy, patiently tried to dissuade me. They talked about how difficult it was to become a doctor and that it was an arduous path, even with extraordinary effort and intellect. But I ignored them and continued studying with all my might. Of course, the days were sometimes tough, full of study. But I didn't dislike learning, and the motivation to marry my first love was strong. Failure wasn't an option for me. In the end, my efforts paid off, and I got into one of America's top medical schools right after my high school. This shocked my parents and relatives. "Well, I always knew you could do it." Some uncles would say that, but I don't really care. Celebrated by those around me, I took this opportunity to move to New York and started living alone. Looking back after becoming a doctor, my reason for pursuing it was simple, but the profession suited me. As soon as I began working as a resident, I demonstrated my talent. Appropriate treatment, surgical skills, and calm judgment were my strengths. I became respected not only by my peers but also by professors and other doctors. After my residency, I found particular fulfillment in treating critical patients in surgery and chose to specialize in that field. "Tom, Mr. Johnson is calling for you." Sandra, a nurse, peeked her head through the exam room door. Her words snapped me awake. I must have dozed off during a quick break. "Director, Mr. Johnson was calling at a time like this." Tom, what kind of dream were you having?" Familiar Sandra teased me, implying she knew I'd been napping. Busted. It was a childhood dream. I wanted to be a doctor to impress my first crush. "Oh really? How sweet of you, Tom. So, what happened to her?" "She's already married to another guy. The childhood friend who inspired me to become a doctor ultimately married someone else, and I never even got to date her. I had planned to propose after becoming a doctor, but a few years after graduating from college, I got an invitation to her wedding. So, without even confessing my feeling, I was left heartbroken. Unfortunately, even with my skills, I couldn't heal my broken heart." "Oh, Tom. I'm sure you could marry any woman you wanted now." "Don't worry, I'm already married to my work," I quipped as I left the exam room and headed to the director's office. I could manage heartbreak. Also, I was already captivated by the interest of medicine at the time. I found fulfillment in saving lives and being appreciated. I intended to dedicate my life to this work. Over the years, my skills improved further, and within a few years, I surpassed the senior doctors who were a decade older. And now, at 37, my name is widely known, and I'm hailed as a brilliant neurosurgeon. I've gained such fame that I've been given the slightly embarrassing nickname Gifted Hands on online hospital review sites. In recent years, reviews and word of mouth have brought patients flocking from all over the country. The patient I saw earlier had just undergone major surgery last week, and the recovery was going well. If you hadn't operated on me, I don't know what would have happened. You are truly a genius, as the rumors say. A gifted hands. He cried while saying this, which made me happy to see him recover, but comforting him was quite a task. Because of that, I felt a little tired today, but I couldn't ignore a call from Mr. Johnson, whom I greatly respected. He is a fair and upright person, and I hold him in the highest regard. Despite my relative youth as a doctor, he acknowledged my abilities and promoted me. He even promised me the position of the next director. Walking down the corridor, I passed a nurse. Ah, Emily. Emily, a young nurse, flinched. This is good timing. About the patient in room 101 in their IV. As I gave her instructions, I noticed something was off. She avoided eye contact, and unusual, dull golden earrings dangled from her ears. After listening to my instructions, she left hastily without meeting my gaze once. Does she dislike me? I muttered to myself in response to her curt attitude. As a rising star, I wasn't well liked by some senior doctors I'd surpassed in rank. In particular, Mr. Johnson's son, Nick, and his associates resented me deeply. Despite relying on his position as the director's son without honing his skills, the fact that I was chosen as the next director over him seemed to have stirred jealousy. Even so, I thought I'd built good relationships with most of the nurses, even if a few doctors disliked me. I only had work-related conversations with Emily, so I couldn't recall doing anything to earn her disdain. Still thinking about her, I made my way to the director's office. As soon as I entered, I sensed the strange atmosphere. In the spacious room were Mr. Johnson in his chair and his son Nick standing beside him, arms crossed. The moment I walked in, Nick's accusing gaze pierced through me. "Excuse me." A faint voice came from behind. Turning around, I saw that it was Emily, who I'd just met. She looked as pale as a prisoner being led to the gallows. "Is something wrong?" I looked at her before asking Mr. Johnson directly. Mr. Johnson wore a somber expression and was about to say something when Nick raised his voice. "Something wrong? You feign ignorance. The evidence is right here." "What? Me? What for?" I was completely clueless. "Look at this." Nick grabbed a stack of papers from Mr. Johnson's desk and threw it at me. There was no way I could catch it all at once, and the documents scattered across the floor. "Nick!" Mr. Johnson reprimanded Nick, but his voice lacked its usual force. Resigned, I knelt down and picked up one of the scattered documents. I noticed scattered x-rays and what looked like prescription forms on the floor. The document I picked up was a medical record, essentially a printed electronic chart. The patient's name, Kevin White, sounded familiar. I recalled it from an internal meeting. This patient had died before undergoing surgery. It was supposed to be a simple case, but he met an untimely death. I remember thinking that if I'd been the surgeon, I could have saved him. But my eyes were drawn to the attending physicians section on the chart. My name was there. Today, we received a complaint from that patient's granddaughter, from his family. Nick said haughtily. "You tampered with the medication. You disposed of the real drugs and prescribed a placebo to hasten his death. A placebo is a fake drug that has no effect." Finally, I understood the situation. I'm being accused of hastening this patient's death. Do you really think I'd do such a thing? I wasn't even in charge of that patient. Don't lie. Nick pointed triumphantly at the documents on the floor. The charts and prescriptions were entered through your account. And we have witnesses. Witnesses to a crime that never happened? Before I could retort, Emily stepped forward, visibly trembling. "Emily." She looked away, unable to meet my gaze. I saw it. It was on March 10th, Tom made a deal with the patient's family to hasten his death in exchange for a large sum of money. I opened my eyes wide in shock at her unexpected words. Emily, why are you lying? I would never do something like that. As a doctor, I save lives, not take them. Besides, I was at a conference on March 10th. Enough. Nick forcefully cut me off. She closed her eyes and repeatedly shook her head. Even if the patient's family asked you, it's still a fact that you hastened his death, he declared. No. It wasn't me. Enough. Mr. Johnson feebly intervened, stopping us. Of course, I want to believe you. But there's just too much evidence now. I can't protect you anymore. Mr. Johnson, please believe me. This is some kind of mistake. I've dedicated everything to this hospital. I recognize your contributions. That's why I appointed you as my successor. But we've collected statements from the patient's family who requested you. You were the attending physician, and they claim they gave you money. That's impossible. Nick sneered at me. Mr. Johnson hung his head low, and Emily trembled without meeting anyone's gaze. It felt as if the ground beneath my feet was collapsing. I was innocent. I knew that better than anyone. But here, everyone was set on incriminating me, and not even Mr. Johnson believed a word I said. I can't remember much of what happened after that, probably because of the shock. The patient's family chose not to go to the police, and Mr. Johnson said my past achievements meant he would handle the matter quietly. But word gets around. The scandal of a once renowned surgeon spread quickly to colleagues and patients alike. No matter how skilled I was, no hospital would hire me now. I was effectively exiled from the medical community. The same review sites that once praised me were now filled with slander. I only glanced at them once before stopping, but my scandal was splashed all over online forums and social media, written in unbearable words. A few days after I resigned from the hospital, it was Sandra who quietly revealed the truth to me. During a gathering, Nick had bragged about how he had forced me out. Yes, it was all the work of Mr. Johnson's son, Nick. Perhaps greed played a role, but above all, he couldn't forgive me for being chosen as the next director over him. On March 10th, when I was away attending a conference, Nick used my name tag and impersonated me to handle the patient. He received a large sum of money from the patient's family and tampered with the medication to hasten the patient's death. Emily, who prepared the medication, likely noticed the tampering. But he took advantage of her large debts, bribing and threatening her with dismissal if she didn't cooperate. It was all part of his scheme. Even after learning this, I didn't feel like proclaiming my innocence or fighting to clear my name. I was just too tired. The medical world, which I had believed was filled with purpose and dedicated to saving lives, had ruthlessly expelled me. Despite my lifelong contributions, over a trivial conspiracy. Even those I trusted abandoned me. I no longer had the energy left to fight. With no spouse or children, my work was my only support, and for a while, I withdrew into my dimly lit apartment. During that time, my parents back home heard the rumors about me. They repeatedly called me. It was difficult to speak to them, but I finally answered, and my worried mother kept urging me, "Come home for a while." She was so persistent that I felt she'd board a flight to New York if I ignored her. Eventually, I relented and reluctantly decided to go home. Since entering medical school, I had devoted myself entirely to studying and working, so it had been years since I last returned home. To be honest, going back was tough and painful. Ever since I gained fame as a gifted surgeon, my name had unnecessarily spread in my hometown. Naturally, this scandal must have spread as well. I didn't feel like returning of my own accord. What should I do with my life now? Even though I still had my medical license, I was no longer effectively a doctor. I couldn't even imagine myself doing anything other than being a doctor. With gloomy thoughts, I gazed down at the clouds passing below from the airplane window. Ah! Grandma, please stay with us. Suddenly, a girl's shriek pierced the air from behind me. The cry was so distressing that I sat up from my seat and instinctively turned around. What happened? A young flight attendant nearby rushed over. Behind me was a girl with an elderly woman, who appeared to be limp and slumped in her seat. It was clear she wasn't simply asleep. "Is there a doctor here?" The flight attendant's pale face filled with fear as she wandered through the seats, calling out. She was probably new to the job. Though she looked attractive, her expression was on the verge of tears, visibly panicking. Should I step up? But I'm not a doctor anymore. Yes, I'm a doctor. Suddenly, a middle-aged man seated across from me raised his hand and stood up. By chance, another doctor happened to be on board. Relieved, I sat back in my chair. I've always wanted to do this, he said, incongruously cheerful as he walked excitedly toward the seat behind me. Now I wouldn't need to intervene. Though reassured, I couldn't help but glance back, just in case. My grandma suddenly started struggling. The girl explained nervously. He inspected the patient with a calm demeanor. Looks like she choked on her in-flight meal. We can handle this with some force, he said as he lifted the elderly woman from behind and repeatedly slapped her back. The girl watched anxiously, but the woman remained unresponsive. That's odd. How about this? He muttered, beginning to show signs of panic. He wrapped his arms around the elderly woman from behind and placed his fist near her diaphragm. It was the Heimlich maneuver, but his positioning was off. If he continued like this, I couldn't hold back. I unbuckled my seatbelt and stood up. No! You'll break her ribs, I shouted. My sudden outburst made the doctor, the girl, and the flight attendant freeze. I rushed over to her to check on her condition. She had a pulse but seemed unconscious. The Heimlich maneuver wouldn't work here. I glanced at the flight attendant, who seemed on the verge of panic. Clutching the elderly woman's hand, she looked at me with a tearful expression. I'm also a doctor. Could you lend me a pen and some antiseptic? I asked her slowly and calmly, trying to ease her anxiety. I caught a glimpse of her name tag under her scarf. It read Maggie. Yes. She immediately stood up and returned with a pen and a spray bottle of antiseptic. I took apart the pen, removed the ink refill, and carefully bent it to create a sharp, clear tube. I thoroughly disinfected the sharpened end with antiseptic. What are you going to do with that? She asked, bewildered. I suspect she has pneumothorax. She can't breathe on her own. Pneumothorax is when air leaks from the lungs. We'd need an X-ray to confirm it, but making her vomit wouldn't help. So, this will manually secure her airway. I doubt anyone around fully understood my explanation. I gripped the tube tightly and carefully located the airway position. Then, with all my strength, I swung my arm down and plunged the tube into her chest. There was a tense silence as everyone held their breath. I was confident I'd inserted it correctly, but even for me, this was the first time using such makeshift tools. As long as she can breathe now, she should be fine, I assured. As the commotion continued, I intended to leave it to the middle-aged doctor and return to my seat. But then, why, you're the one from that time, the girl shouted. You're trying to let Grandma die too, just like Grandpa. Her words made me realize who she was, and I froze. I tried to avert my gaze, but she yelled, "You can't deny it anymore," and grabbed my arm with all her strength. Eyes filled with hatred and a determination not to let me escape glared at me. No doubt about it. She must be the granddaughter of the patient who died in that hospital incident. Although we had never met directly, the incident had caused quite a stir. It wouldn't be surprising if she recognized my face from the internet. To her, I am not even a doctor. I am the hated enemy who let her grandfather die. Yet, the tense silence was broken by a faint sound of breathing, a soft whoosh. Ah, we're out of the woods now, the middle-aged doctor said with relief. In front of him, her chest rose and fell gently as she began to breathe again. Thank you, young man. You've got real skill, like a miracle worker. He seemed to realize he'd misdiagnosed the situation and sheepishly thanked me. The girl still looked unconvinced, but she reluctantly let go of my arm and checked on her grandmother. This is just first aid. She needs to be taken to a hospital immediately, I said. As soon as Maggie heard this, she dashed off. Moments later, an announcement rang out through the cabin. Due to a medical emergency on board, this flight will be making an emergency landing at the nearest airport. She must have promptly spoken to the captain and arranged the landing. Despite her inexperience, she acted swiftly. Although her constant handholding showed she was a bit uncertain as a flight attendant, She seemed kind-hearted. Maggie returned after the announcement. Thank you so much. Because of you, her life was saved. Now more composed, she smiled and thanked me warmly. I only did what I could, I replied. We'll land at the airport soon and transfer the passenger to a hospital. Yes, we should hurry. Because her condition isn't stable yet, could I trouble you to accompany her to the hospital? What? I glanced over at the girl. She frowned but didn't voice any objections. Yes. Now that I'd begun treatment, I felt responsible. Though hesitant, I agreed to go to the hospital. The plane made its emergency landing, dropping off just the girl, her grandmother, and me before resuming its original flight path. We headed directly to the hospital in an ambulance that Maggie had arranged. In the ambulance, the girl remained silent, occasionally glancing at me but saying nothing. Once at the hospital, I explained the situation to the doctors. The elderly woman underwent an emergency surgery. The operation was successful. I watched from a distance as the girl clung to her conscious grandmother, sobbing with relief. Seeing her cry and talk to her grandmother was a stark contrast to how fiercely she'd confronted me on the plane. Now, she seemed like any ordinary girl. Having lost her grandfather under suspicious circumstances, her stubborn attitude was understandable. I'm glad I could help. I thought so to myself. After ensuring she was stable, I quietly left the hospital and headed back to the airport. But there, to my surprise, was Maggie waiting for me. She had changed out of her flight attendant uniform into a casual dress. With her hair down, she looked much softer. Thank you so much for everything, she said politely, and I found myself flustered by her gratitude. My name is Maggie. I can't thank you enough for saving that passenger. I really just did what anyone would do, I replied. She told me she'd booked the next flight for me, so I accepted gratefully. In her private clothes, she was cheerful and talkative. She openly praised my quick actions as amazing and admirable, making me feel good. When I commended her for arranging the emergency landing, she blushed deeply. As we chatted while waiting for the flight, we quickly became friends. Let's have a meal sometime, I said as we exchanged contact information before parting ways. Although my return trip was a bit delayed, I safely made it home, thanks to the flight she booked. After leaving New York with a gloomy heart, I now felt surprisingly refreshed. I got off the plane at the local airport and went straight to my parents' home. My mother, who had been worried, seemed reassured by my unexpectedly bright demeanor. You sounded like you were on your last legs over the phone, but you look healthier than I expected, she said with a laugh. After catching up with my parents, I enjoyed a calm, unhurried time with them. Here's what I learned later. A few days after I left the hospital, Nora White, the elderly woman I had helped, was able to sit up. Her attending doctor had told her, "You're lucky there was a talented doctor on that flight." Is that so? Then, I should properly thank him, Nora said, asking her granddaughter Lynn about me. Naturally, Lynn couldn't answer where I was. I don't know where he went. But, he's the one who let Grandpa die, she spat. Would such a man desperately try to save me? Nora asked, and Lynn fell silent. After directly encountering me, Lynn also began to harbor doubts. Besides, he's a brilliant doctor who managed to handle that emergency. I don't know, but Grandpa didn't die of natural causes, right? Something's definitely off. Lynn couldn't easily accept me, the person she'd long resented as her grandfather's enemy. It seems like there's more to this story. Being the wife of a wealthy magnate, Nora was both clever and shrewd. While I was enjoying a brief period of peace at home, it seems that Nora was discharged from the hospital and immediately began searching for my whereabouts. She contacted the airline and verified the situation again with Maggie, and using the financial power of the White family, she managed to locate me, who was well known through the media. I decided to stay with my parents for a while, tired after losing my job. But after spending years working day and night, I felt restless when not working, even at home. So I asked my parents if I could help with the small and they ran. Compared to being a doctor, it was easier because I could sleep at night. Plus, physical work and chatting with guests served as a refreshing change of pace. A few days after I began helping out. Hello, is anyone here? A refined woman's voice came from the entrance. We didn't have any reservations today, so it must have been a walk-in guest. Hi, how are you doing? I opened the door and stood speechless. There stood Nora with a smile, Lynn with a stern face, and Maggie looking troubled. We finally found you. Could you come with us for a bit? Nora spoke gently but with an undeniable forcefulness. There was no room to refuse. I was ushered into the luxury car parked at the entrance, and we were soon on the road. How did you know I was here? Unable to contain myself in the car, I asked. Nora smiled elegantly. You're quite well known. Besides, you seem close to her, she said, glancing at Maggie beside me. Don't blame her for acting on her own. I learned about your situation from her because she was involved at that time. I couldn't help but glance at Maggie, wondering what she had shared. Like a puppy scolded for mischief, she ducked her head. I'm sorry. She insisted on thanking you, and I couldn't refuse. But I only told her the truth. I let out a small sigh of relief. At least, it seemed like there were no unfounded lies being spread about me this time. As we spoke, the car parked in the lot of a high-end restaurant renowned in the area. The manager and chef even came out to greet us. Although far from New York, the White family seemed to be highly regarded here as well. Naturally, we were shown to a private room. Once inside, overwhelmed by the unfamiliar atmosphere, I was stunned to see guests already waiting. Mr. Johnson. Anne. Mr. Johnson from the hospital where I used to work was there. His son Nick and the nurse Emily were also present. These were the three people who had abandoned and betrayed me. Before I could feel the anger I had tried to forget, the three of them began to apologize profusely. We're so sorry. What? What was going on? As I stood bewildered, Nora began explaining from the side. I know it's presumptuous, but I couldn't stand by and do nothing. According to her explanation, Nora's husband Kevin had been a prominent local landowner and one of the wealthiest people in the region. However, when he was hospitalized with a terminal diagnosis, the relatives who heard about his limited time began squabbling over inheritance. There, a son and his wife, eager to receive their inheritance quickly, approached a young doctor with a timid demeanor, proposing, "Is there a way to hasten the death? We will pay you handsomely for it." At a loss, the young doctor consulted Nick, his senior and Mr. Johnson's son. Nick saw this as an opportunity to bring me down. Seeing an opportunity to bring me down, he told the young doctor, "I'll take it from here," and took over the patient's care. He then used my name tag while I was away to impersonate me, pocketing the money and pinning the entire crime on me. He even accessed my computer to log into the hospital system, fabricating medical charts and prescriptions to make it appear as though I had been Kevin's attending physician. Emily happened to witness the scene by chance. I knew the truth. Tears streamed down Emily's face as she haltingly explained herself. Her attire was modest, and she no longer wore those expensive-looking earrings. I was a compulsive spender and loved branded accessories. It got out of control, and I accumulated a huge amount of debt on my credit card. I tried to pay it off by working night shifts, but it was a vicious cycle of buying more things. I was exhausted and overwhelmed. Desperate to escape my debt, so I took hush money from Nick. Just as I wondered if it was merely an excuse, she raised her tear-streaked face and exclaimed, "But," as she looked at me. "But, when I heard that you had been forced to quit, I felt so guilty. I did something terrible. I know this won't heal the wounds you suffered, but I'll accept punishment. Please, bring Tom back," she said, apologizing to me before pleading with Mr. Johnson. "I'm also sorry," Mr. Johnson began. "You were telling the truth, but I was swayed by fabricated evidence and didn't believe you." He apologized to me as well. "This may be bold of me to ask, but if you'd like, would you return to our hospital? We need your skills." I didn't know what to say. No amount of apologies could erase my tarnished reputation. As I stood silently, Nora quietly interjected, "Your innocence has already been proven. Just stand tall. We'll make a public announcement through the media, and if anyone tries to harm you, we will crush them." I had already witnessed Nora's resourcefulness, wealth, and influence firsthand. Though crush sounded a bit drastic, it was convincing. But still, why would you go to such lengths for me? I asked, unable to fully believe it. After all, we weren't close. Why would Nora do this for me? I'd lost faith in people. She gave a gentle, encouraging smile. Because I'm alive today thanks to you. It would be wrong not to return the favor. I was nearly brought to tears. Thank you. But please give me a little time to think. I couldn't answer right away. The situation was too overwhelming for me to fully grasp right away. I left the restaurant and returned home in the luxury car. After sharing everything that had happened with my parents and telling them I was leaning toward accepting her offer, they encouraged me with smiles. You loved being a doctor so much. If that's what you want to do, you should go back to it. That's right. You didn't do anything wrong, so follow your passion. Even with their support, I hadn't fully made up my mind. Nora frequently reached out to me, but I kept postponing my response, coming up with various excuses. One day, I saw my name on a big headline on an online news site as the tragic falsely accused genius surgeon. The article detailed Nick's crimes and the hospital's response. Through that news, I learned that Nora's son and daughter-in-law, Nick, and Emily had been arrested. Now my name wasn't just known for genius neurosurgeon and gifted hands but also hero who saved lives bravely amidst tragedy. The news quickly spread across the internet, not only clearing my name but also making me even more well-known. After the media inquiries had died down, Maggie visited the inn on her own. My flight was nearby, so I stopped by. She said, blushing slightly as she smiled and booked a room. She stayed for several days. However, as the days passed, she showed no signs of leaving, and I grew increasingly concerned. Is everything okay with work? I asked her this a few days after she began her stay. It was while I was serving dinner prepared for her. I'm fine, she replied. No way. Flight attendants have busy schedules. Suspecting something, I pressed her, and she reluctantly confessed that she had come to convince me on Nora's behalf. You've been cleared of all wrongdoing. Why aren't you returning to medicine? When I remained silent, Maggie leaned forward and said, You're needed on the front lines of medicine. If you don't go back now, when will you? Where's that decisiveness you showed when you saved Nora? She was right. Helping Nora made me realize something. I wanted to be a doctor again. I wanted to save lives and help people rebuild their lives. That's what I'd lived for. But every time I thought that, a doubtful voice whispered deep inside me. Can I really regain the trust one once lost so easily? Enough of that, she said, frustrated. I expected her to storm out, but her words took me by surprise. I'm not leaving until you nod your head. What? She firmly settled into the inn. Apparently, she'd already spoken with my parents. I'm going to help out here, so please let me stay a little longer. She had asked them. She was young, smart, beautiful, cheerful, and acknowledged my abilities. My parents were completely won over and took a liking to her. My mother was already playing the mother-in-law role. I wish she'd marry into our family, she said, half jokingly, half seriously. Seeing the situation, I finally made up my mind. I'm going back to New York, I announced, and Maggie's face lit up. You're going back to being a doctor? Yes, but I won't return to my previous hospital. I'm planning to open my own clinic. That's wonderful. She smiled. As much as I hated to admit it, she looked truly beautiful when she smiled like that. Can I go back to New York with you? She asked, her eyes sparkling. All I could do was raise my hands in surrender. After returning to New York, as I told Maggie, I established a small clinic. My skills quickly gained a good reputation, and the clinic grew gradually. As the clinic expanded, I found myself short-handed, so I reached out to Emily, who had been released from prison, to work as a nurse. Despite having been coerced into framing me, she had shown the courage to testify, and I wouldn't have been here without her. I wanted to show my gratitude somehow. I still keep in touch with Nora occasionally. When she told me that Lynn was inspired by me and aimed to become a nurse, I felt a little embarrassed. It looks like we'll have a long relationship ahead, Dr. Scott, Nora said, applying pressure, which made me smile wryly. I still kept in contact with Maggie, too. Though our busy schedules and her globetrotting made meeting up after the incident rare. We'd occasionally update each other on our lives. Recently, however, she'd been visiting the clinic frequently with gifts from her flights. You've been coming often lately. Is something wrong? I asked as I accepted the gifts. Maggie mumbled quietly. Nora said if I don't hurry, someone might steal you away. What did you say? Nothing at all. I asked again since I hadn't heard clearly, but she, blushing furiously, vehemently denied it. The nurses took the opportunity to tease me relentlessly. To be honest, I hadn't been oblivious to her feelings. However, she was young, with a bright future ahead of her. Maybe a part of me still harbored some lingering distrust. I hesitated, unable to fully trust her. But then, Nora finally reached out. Dr. Scott, women have all sorts of time limits. Isn't it time to make things clear? I couldn't argue with her. It's rare for you to call me, Dr. Scott, Maggie said when I summoned her for the first time. The airport observation deck. I chose a location that seemed convenient for her. Between surgeries, I found some time to escape from the hospital, still dressed in my white coat. She arrived in a dress, looking as beautiful as she did the day we met at the airport. Looking back now, it was Maggie who helped me return to the light, as much as Nora had with her support. She encouraged me when I felt weak, sometimes scolding me, and always stood by me with unwavering patience. I owed it to her to respond. She gazed at the planes taking off. Watching her, I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the small, fabric-covered box I'd prepared. Inside was a ring. Maggie. I called her name for the first time. She turned around, startled. I opened the box and offered it to her. Will you? My words were drowned out by the sound of the departing plane. My luck seemed to falter even at this crucial moment. But she smiled. Yes, I'd love to. Hey Emily, it seems like our company's sales performance has been underachieving. Is everything okay? I heard a rumor from a colleague at the headquarters that they might start restructuring companies with poor performance nationwide. So I'm a bit worried. Really? Is that so? It would be great if we could all come together to find a way through this. To overcome this crisis, the cooperation of everyone is necessary. It's up to me, Emily, and all the other colleagues to work together as one. I'm John, 35 years old. So this is the company I'll be working for from today. I entered the subsidiary's entrance with a bit of nervousness. The building was much warmer than I expected and had a nostalgic feel to it. Until recently, I had been a sales manager at a major general trading company. I thought my career was going smoothly, but a certain incident changed everything. As a result, I was demoted to a subsidiary in the countryside. At first, I was really depressed. But the subsidiary's business involved using local specialty products for food enterprises. Local fresh vegetables and fruits were used for jams, dressings, and health-oriented snacks. These products were a way to promote local food culture nationwide, and even globally. There was more than enough meaning in the mission to contribute to the community and support agriculture. I decided to see my demotion as a stroke of good luck. That's what I thought. That's what I decided to think. The woman who met me almost on time at the reception said, "You're John, right?" As the woman approached me, I honestly replied, "Yes." She smiled warmly and said, "I'm Emily, and I'll be in the same department as you. Pleased to meet you. Mr. Anderson and Kevin are waiting for you. Please come this way." Her modest makeup made her seem approachable. My first impression of Emily was just that. I had met Mr. Anderson and Kevin online beforehand, but this was the first time meeting them in person. Their impressions were slightly different in person. Mr. Anderson, shorter than I imagined, said, "John, welcome from far away. We have high expectations for your experience. Please work well with us." I felt tense. After a brief greeting with Mr. Anderson and Kevin, Emily showed me around the workplace. In the office-attached processing plant, a part-time woman was working. She naturally called out to someone who seemed to be the part-time leader. "Good morning, Laura." "Oh, Emily, good morning. And who is this with you, a new member?" Laura stopped her work to look at me. I immediately introduced myself. "Hi, I'm John, and I'll be working with you from today." Nice to meet you. John, nice to meet you. If you have any questions, just ask Emily, she'll tell you everything. Don't hesitate, okay? Laura gave Emily a look. Well, yes, I guess I can handle most things. Laura. Saying that, the two of them chuckled together. I hadn't noticed it before, but Emily was very charming, smiling with narrowed eyes. Her demeanor was like that of a beloved female announcer who had made it into the Hall of Fame. She continued to guide me around the workplace, and throughout, she kept talking to me, making me forget the anxiety of the new environment. My assignment at the subsidiary was in the administrative department. After being a sales manager, I transitioned to supporting roles in HR, finance, and general affairs. My career has always been centered around customer-facing sales, so I honestly felt lost not knowing how to handle my new duties. The subsidiary is a small to medium-sized business with about 20 full-time employees and 15 part-time workers. Though the number of part-time staff can change depending on how busy we are. Including me, there are 4 people in the administrative department. Kevin, Emily, and one person who recently went on maternity leave. I am filling in for the employee on maternity leave. The roles in HR, finance, and general affairs aren't clearly divided. So I need to learn a bit of everything. I went through the manuals given to me, creating a list of questions to clarify any uncertainties. It felt like I was a new employee all over again. Emily has a girl-next-door charm that's very approachable. While she's not flashy, her smile brings comfort. She readily answered the questions I had compiled, and our conversations often included lighthearted chats. Her soft voice and the thoughtful gestures she occasionally showed were reassuring. From the first time I met her, Emily somehow became a person of interest to me. She kindly spoke to me as I navigated through the unfamiliar environment. John, if there's anything I can help with, please don't hesitate to ask. Whenever I paused in my tasks, she was proactive in offering support and teaching me the ropes of the job. When I started to get the hang of my job, we received a request from a public agency to check the status of our labor insurance enrollment. It seems to be a task the administrative department handles annually, and it was previously managed by the employee who is now on maternity leave. But Emily had taken it over. One evening, as I was doing overtime on a different task, I glanced over at Emily's desk and realized she was still working too. The way she was focused on the documents was memorable. Emily, you're still here? Are you okay? By this time, I had become comfortable enough to speak casually with Emily. Yes, I'm just gathering some missing data for the labor insurance report. It's my first time handling it, so I'm following the manual. Really? Is there anything I can help with? I was working on another task, but it was almost finished. Intending to help her, I called out to her. Thank you, but I should be fine. It's better if I do this task alone to make sure it's done correctly. You must be tired from the overtime, John. Don't worry about me and feel free to head home. The deadline is tomorrow, so I'll make sure to meet it. She showed me a thumbs up and smiled as she responded. Trying not to disturb her, I finished my work and went home. The next morning, I asked her, "How did the work go yesterday?" I managed to finish it just in time for the last train. It took quite a while. She looked more tired than usual. It was a moment when I truly realized how earnestly and wholeheartedly she dedicates herself to her work. As we often talked about our work, the conversation naturally shifted to the challenges and difficulties of our jobs. Work can be tough, right? I've hit quite a few big obstacles in the past myself. She paused thoughtfully before slowly starting to speak. Actually, I have too. I experienced an unexpected failure in a project once. Really? I thought you always handle your tasks so cautiously, I couldn't imagine you making a big mistake. Her work had always been well prepared and meticulous. While there were minor slip-ups, I couldn't imagine her making any major mistakes. Of course, it happens. When we were starting a new welfare project, I made a huge estimation error, which delayed the project significantly. Wow, that must have been tough. Were you okay? She looked out the window and smiled a bit sadly. It was really hard at first. I faced severe criticism from stakeholders, and there were times when I lost confidence in myself. She picked up her coffee cup and slowly stirred it as she continued. But even those failures ultimately became valuable experiences. They taught me the importance of risk management in planning and execution. That's so like you, Emily. I really admire how you use your failures to improve yourself, I said. Her face brightened up, and I couldn't help but smile too. Thank you. Everyone makes mistakes, right? What's important is what you learn from them and how you bounce back, she replied. Yeah, hearing you talk about it, I'm reminded that I need to do my best in this new environment too. Thanks, Emily. She looked at me with kind eyes and smiled warmly. You'll be fine, John. Let's keep working hard together. Thanks, I responded. After Emily shared her past failures, I found myself deep in thought. I needed to make a fresh start here. I needed to have the courage to move forward positively, like Emily. Actually, I've made a similar mistake myself. I haven't told you why I was transferred here, I confessed. Emily looked into my eyes, listening silently. I used to lead a project at the parent company, setting up a loan program targeted at domestic SMEs. The aim was to find SMEs that were struggling financially but had potential, and to help them expand their business. The old general trading firm used to import various products from around the world and then sell them globally, but nowadays, with changing times, it's not just about trading but also investing, providing services, and even financing, I explained. So, it was a project to save companies like ours, right? That's impressive, John. Emily responded, showing genuine interest. But one day, when the project was going well, an unexpected problem occurred. A problem? What happened? She asked. I took a deep breath before explaining the issue. There was a mistake in the allocation of the budget. Because of our error, the companies that were supposed to receive the loans didn't get the funds they needed. Our mistake significantly impacted their business plans. That's why I was demoted, I said. She looked surprised at first but then gave me a warm look. But it was you who started that project, John. One failure doesn't define everything. You've also built up a lot of effort and achievements. She reassured me. Hearing that from you somehow makes me feel saved. Thank you, Emily. Sharing past failures felt like exposing my vulnerabilities. I might not have talked about it in the past, but I'm glad I talked to Emily about it. I truly felt that way. It would be great if we could continue to take on new challenges together. I want to be there to support you, too, she said, her voice cheerful and encouraging. Just having you by my side gives me enough courage, Emily. Thank you, I replied. That day, I felt like we understood each other better. It was a moment that deepened our relationship further. At some point, a sales report came in from the sales department. The revenue was decent, but the trend was flat. For the second consecutive year, the sales target was unmet, and the profitability was declining, a worrying situation. Hey, Emily. It seems like our company's sales performance continues to be below target. Are we doing anything about it? She looked into my eyes as she answered. Yes, it seems so. We're nowhere near the budget targets. Mr. Anderson and the sales department are trying to develop new customers. But it doesn't seem to be reflecting in the performance. She replied, her voice calm but without a smile. I heard a rumor from a colleague at the headquarters that they might start restructuring companies with poor performance nationwide. So I've been a bit concerned, I added. Really? Is that true? She asked, unable to hide her surprise. There might be changes in the upper management or downsizing before that. Either way, it will affect everyone's jobs here. And it could negatively impact the local farmers too, I explained. She nodded worriedly as she listened to me. That's true. This company is very important not just to us but also to the local farmers. I wonder if there's a way to turn this situation around. Instead of leaving it all to the sales department. It would be great if we could all come together to find a way through this. She responded firmly to my words. I love this company, including the part-time staff. The local farmers are kind, and I absolutely want to protect this. I don't know if I can be of much help, but I want to do my best alongside you, John, she said. We vowed to help each other and move forward together, finding a solution. In order to overcome this crisis, The cooperation of everyone is necessary. Emily and I, along with all the other colleagues, must work together unitedly. Emily has really excelled in the administrative department. For example, she's been advancing the digitization of documents, reducing the amount of paper used. This has improved efficiency by shortening the time needed to search for information and has helped cut costs. Although the savings might seem minor, I believe it's all about individual awareness. Ah, Kevin, are you printing that? I'll share it in the folder, so please look at it on the screen. Kevin was reluctant, but such shifts in mindset are bound to pay off eventually. But all my efforts alone aren't enough to improve the company's overall performance. Hearing this, I could tell how much Emily cared about the company. She perfectly manages her duties and yet aspires to achieve greater results. She looked a bit disheartened as she glanced at her desk. I have my limits too. It's so frustrating. I approached her to offer some encouragement. Look, Emily, just having you here has already changed this department a lot. Even if your efforts don't directly lead to improved company performance, your attitude has a significant impact on those around you. That's a commendable achievement. She looked up slightly, grateful for my words. It makes me happy to hear that from you, John. Please let me know if there's more I can do. I want to do my best for this company. With someone like her around, I truly believe we can overcome this situation. I had been secretly developing a tool without telling Emily. Actually, Emily, I used to work in the IT department at the parent company. The general trading firm encouraged job rotation to equip colleagues with various skills, and as part of that, I spent my first 5 years in the IT department. She looked surprised. Wow, I didn't know that. So that's why you're strong in IT. Though I hadn't intended to show off my IT skills, I continued with a smile. Well, you could say that. Even after I left the IT department, I continued studying on my own. That knowledge might come in handy now. She listened with keen interest. I've noticed that some of the business processes here take too long. But with the knowledge I gained from my studies, I think we could improve them somewhat. Really? What kind of improvements are you thinking about? She leaned in eagerly. For example, customer management. Here we use spreadsheet software for managing customers. And the file sizes are so large that it takes time just to open them. But if we use a database, customer management could be much simpler. Also, if we link inventory information of processed goods with order information, it will be easier to see what is lacking and how much. That should reduce situations where we can't accept orders because of insufficient inventory. Wow, that's interesting. I've always felt stressed about how slow it is to open the spreadsheet software. But is it easy to set up that database thing? Her question was valid. Yes, it's relatively easy now. I've already created the database and the interface to operate it, and I'd like you to try it out. You've already made it? John, that's amazing. I'm looking forward to trying it. I showed her how to use it. Wow, you can register the data with just one button? She was surprised but enjoyed operating it. Yes. If everyone uses this, something that took a week from order to shipment could now be done in an hour. I spoke with confidence. That's incredible. Who are you, John? Her eyes sparkled, and her words seemed filled with respect. But there's one potential issue. Whether the part-time staff and the sales department colleagues will use this screen. They might resist changing the way they've been accustomed to. Leave that to me. I'll talk to the part-time leader, Laura, and the sales department. If using this tool makes our jobs easier, it would be a waste not to use it. Emily agreed with my proposal and immediately started convincing the stakeholders. Thanks to the trust she had built up, everyone readily agreed to use the tool. A few days later, when I visited the processing plant, Laura, the part-time leader, approached me. John, I heard about it. You made that tool, right? It was a bit of a hassle at first. But now it's great because I can see at a glance how much of each product to make and when. Thank you. I was glad to see it being used. There was one more thing I needed to do. A strategy to increase sales. I discussed it with Emily. Emily, there's one more thing I want to try. How about advertising on social media? You know our company sells products through our website and online store, but we haven't used social media yet, right? I think it can reach a much broader audience than our current methods, especially for targeting the younger generation. Emily looked surprised and responded, advertising on social media is perfect for today's era. It might make our products known to a lot more people. I have a friend who's active on social media, so I'll ask about how to do it. I could tell Emily was excited about my proposal. Thanks. It's reassuring to have someone with connections. Our company's strengths in health-oriented products and specialties should appeal to people interested in those areas, I said. Indeed. We should propose this to the sales department too, she agreed. With her advice, I went ahead and made the proposal to the sales department. I prepared the presentation materials myself and presented them. The sales department was initially apprehensive about my proposal, but Emily's support had a significant impact. Eventually, Emily's enthusiasm convinced our colleague, Kevin, and even moved our president, Mr. Anderson. Moving Mr. Anderson was no small feat. It made me realize once again how amazing she is. Thus, the company decided to start advertising using social media. Emily learned the specifics of social media broadcasting from her friend. We focused on connecting with our audience through social media. Initially, everyone was skeptical about the impact on sales, but when a certain influencer promoted our products, our sales dramatically increased. We immediately caught the increase in orders thanks to the database system we had built. We managed to prevent stock shortages by increasing part-time staff and coordinating with farmers. Our proposal began to gain support from all our colleagues. Everyone agreed with the idea and showed a united front in their efforts. Seeing everyone's reaction, I'm really glad I made the proposal. Including Emily, everyone is working on it positively. It should certainly reflect on the overall company performance, I mentioned. Yes, I think so too. I feel like everyone's demeanor is changing, Emily replied. The company's atmosphere started to change distinctly. 3 months after implementing our proposal, during the monthly sales report, the performance had clearly improved. Using social media for advertising opened up new customer demographics and increased operational efficiency through data centralization. Our efforts directly contributed to an increase in revenue. Emily spoke to me with a smile. John, did you see the sales report? Your proposal has changed the company. It wasn't just me. It was possible because of your support, Emily. I truly believe that, I replied. The successful project not only transformed the company's atmosphere but also gave me new confidence. After recovering from a previous setback, I was now able to look forward to the future with optimism. Without you, John, the company wouldn't have changed this much. I'll continue to work hard and contribute to the company, inspired by you. Emily said. Your attitude is also a great motivation for me, Emily. Let's keep working hard together, I responded. In the following months, profits continued to rise. Looking at the annual revenue, our growth rate was the highest among all the group companies. Everyone's change in mindset led to actively bringing and implementing various ideas and improvements. That was when I received a call from our parent company. John, who was that call from? Emily asked, probably curious about the rare call to me. Oh, it was from a former boss at the parent company. They've heard about our performance improvements and asked if I would come back, I explained. Wow, that's incredible. But what will you do, John? She asked, a bit anxious. I turned it down. The job at the parent company was appealing. But the importance of human connections I've experienced here feels more valuable to me now, I answered. After a moment of surprise, she smiled happily. If that's your decision, John, then it must be the best one. We are also reassured by your presence, she said. The job at the parent company was indeed challenging. However, I find the warm relationships here far more important than the competitive and political maneuvering I experienced there. I truly believe that from the bottom of my heart. I'm truly relieved to hear that. Please continue to work with us, she said with a bright smile. She still has that adorable smile. I chose not to return to the parent company because I want to cherish what we've built here. Because I want to keep seeing Emily's cute smile and her brightness, always. I thought to myself again. That evening, I asked her to meet me alone because I wanted to talk. Emily, actually, there's something important I want to discuss with you. A lot has happened since I came here. But the biggest change for me has been meeting you, I said. Really? I paused before continuing. Because you were here, I could stay positive even after being demoted. It was because of you that I came to love this company and wanted to save it. There have been many challenges I've overcome thanks to you. So, I have a favor to ask, I told her. Emily looked surprised but was staring intently into my eyes. Emily, will you marry me? I want to be with you in the future too. I want to keep seeing your smile. I feel like I can face anything as long as you're with me, I proposed. Tears welled up in her eyes, and for a while, she was lost for words. However, she soon smiled gently. Yes, I'd love to. I can be happy with you, John. I really enjoyed working on improvements with you. And John, you were so cool. I look forward to continuing our journey together, she accepted. At that moment, my heart was completely fulfilled. We looked deeply into each other's eyes, feeling hopeful and happy about the new life that was starting. 2 years had passed since then. Our company continued to improve its performance, and recently, we received a special award for business innovation from the parent company. There have been frequent interviews from the parent company's public relations department. And our management department has been busy handling them. We were surrounded by congratulatory messages. Emily, thank you for today. I never imagined we could have our wedding surrounded by everyone like this, I said. I'm also incredibly happy to be blessed by so many people, she responded. Our wedding was held in the company's garden. Our colleagues and locals gathered there, their warm smiles celebrating our new beginning. The ceremony progressed in a homely atmosphere with handmade decorations and dishes made from local produce. We held hands, renewing our hopes and resolutions for the life ahead. With the warm support of our colleagues and the local community, we believe we can overcome any difficulty. Our wedding was just the beginning. From now on, we will walk through life together, contributing to our company and the local community. With Emily by my side, I can overcome anything. I am certain of that. It seems unlikely that Tom's wife will be able to have children. This is another reason why marrying an older woman isn't advisable. Jason remarked. At 40, I found myself employed at a new company and was directly reported by the department head, Jason. I was shaking with anger and insisted that he retract his statement, but Jason seemed oblivious to his own blunder. Worse yet, at the founding anniversary party, Jason and his wife insulted my wife and me. Oh my! Is this your mother? Wife? I thought she was your mother. Amidst a small crowd that had gathered and fallen silent around us, the president of the company, Mr. Smith, rushed over with a pale face. Oh my, I never expected to meet you here. My name is Tom, and I'm 40 years old. I work as an engineer in medical device services. The company is a leader in the industry. I joined as a skilled employee with prior work experience last year, and it's my first year here. I've resolved to work here for many years, striving daily. In my current workplace, there's a prevailing notion that joining a new workplace at 40 is rather late. From my first day, Jason had looked at me suspiciously. Even if you have engineering experience, coming here at that age, did you make a big mistake at your last job? Or do you plan to leave this one soon too? Perhaps it was understandable for him to think so at the beginning. I had worked as an engineer in other companies until my late 20s, but then I spent years abroad until I was 39 last year. Initially, I went to France on a working holiday where my sister was living after she got married. Then, for about 10 years, I lived in places like Africa and the Middle East, moving every few years as part of Doctors Without Borders. I served as a logistician in Doctors Without Borders. A logistician is responsible for procuring and managing the supplies and equipment necessary for aid. I also coordinated patient transport and ensured the routes for it. I had a non-medical staff role working alongside medical professionals. When I first went to France, it was meant to be a one-year working holiday, just a chance to see a bit of the world while I was young. After over 5 years of working as an engineer in the US, I couldn't picture myself living the same life forever at that company. I found myself liking this earnest way of living abroad. Using my skills fully to live each day was enjoyable to me. I regretted not having experienced living abroad earlier like my sister. My sister moved to France early for her university education, then found a job and got married there. My sister also said this: "Tom, like me, you thrive better abroad than just coast along in the US. Why don't you come back after your working holiday ends?" I truly felt the same way. So, after a year passed and I briefly returned to the US, I was working part-time while preparing to go back to France. It was then that an enticing job opportunity I found determined the rest of my life. I came across a job posting for Doctors Without Borders. It involved traveling to medically underserved areas worldwide to help people while living among them. The work required dedicating one's labor to assist those suffering from conflicts, natural disasters, and poverty. Upon researching further, I found that they were hiring electricians, architects, and even engineers for medical device services. All these positions required practical experience. Having experience as an engineer, I filled out the application and submitted it immediately. During the interview, they inquired extensively about my motivation. I want to support healthcare with whatever I can do. I'm eager to use my language skills, physical strength, and determination to help others. I spoke passionately and passed. After that, I registered as a temp staff and participated in domestic training. I spent over 6 months working part-time until I could participate in training abroad. My first assignment was in the Middle East and Africa. In the town I was assigned to, there was a shortage of vaccines for infectious diseases, causing many to become severely ill from conditions that could be easily treated in a hospital in the US. The medical team's mission was to vaccinate all the children in the town center. I was responsible for managing the vaccine transport vehicles and drivers. Just transporting the vaccines was a difficult task in this town. The roads were in terrible condition, and in the scorching heat, it was challenging to manage the temperature of the vaccines. Vaccines that finally arrived safely would be ruined when the town's power supply failed. Interactions with the drivers were also complicated. English alone was not enough, leading to frequent misunderstandings and arguments. However, when we finally completed the mission, I felt a profound sense of happiness. The sense of unity with the doctors, staff, locals, and patients provided an irreplaceable feeling of accomplishment. By that time, nearing 30, I had forgotten about returning to my previous company or the US and decided to make this job my career. Over the next 10 years, I grew not only as an engineer but also as a general logistician who could lead other staff members. Although there were many dangers, and I even became seriously ill myself, I felt like I had found my true calling. Being single and unencumbered, I vaguely thought I would continue performing these medical missions alone indefinitely. That changed last year when I met a woman, and, fortunately, we proceeded to get married. Her name was Catherine, and she was a doctor working with Doctors Without Borders. Catherine and I had worked diligently on the same team, and at some point, it became clear that we were attracted to each other. Although Catherine was into me, she avoided discussing anything further. "I'm 10 years older than you, Tom." Indeed, at the time, Catherine was 49, 10 years senior to me at 39. I always felt strange about her words. Given her longer tenure in this line of work, Catherine should understand that age difference didn't matter. In many parts of the world, couples with significant age differences are not uncommon. Indeed, it's not unusual for a woman to be older. While it might be noticeable in America, both Catherine's and my sensibilities were more aligned with our international experiences. So age shouldn't be a concern. To me, Catherine was not only a doctor I respected but also a dignified and beautiful woman, a beloved partner. "I'm serious about wanting to marry you, Catherine." I often asserted so. However, Catherine wouldn't say yes. So, I thought perhaps there was something else concerning her that she wasn't telling me except for age gaps. And I didn't push for more information. One day, an emergency mission started in the medical group. A hospital in a conflict zone was at risk. The mission involved safely transporting pregnant women waiting to give birth to another region. I was busy securing enough gasoline to ensure the round-trip transport. Somehow, I managed to get the car going and safely transported everyone to another hospital. But then I realized that Catherine hadn't arrived at the new hospital. When I asked the local staff, they informed me Catherine is still at the original hospital. She said she wouldn't be returning for a while, despite the original hospital being at risk of getting caught in the conflict. I rode a bicycle several miles back to the original hospital. There, I found Catherine, earnestly trying to make frightened children smile. The other children were those of pregnant women. Due to limitations, we could only transport a minimum number of people, and children from larger families had to be left behind. Catherine chose to stay at the original hospital, aware of the risks, to encourage these children. Seeing Catherine's decision, I thought I should stay and help too. Though troubled, Catherine said to me, "Thank you." That night, after the children had settled down to sleep, Catherine shared her story. I have an older sister. When we were kids, I was frail, so our parents paid more attention to me than to her. I think she must have felt very lonely. Of course, those who are more vulnerable should be helped first, but in doing so, others are sacrificed. These children, separated from their mothers and siblings, must feel incredibly anxious. After getting my medical license, I left home and even left the US because I was healthy, and I hoped my parents would start caring more about my sister. I wonder how they are. I haven't been back for so long, but I hope my sister and parents are getting along well and are healthy. Listening to Catherine's story, I felt I understood the source of her incredible character. Her strong sense of self-sacrifice stemmed from her concern for her sister during their childhood. She probably thought she shouldn't be happier than her sister. If she couldn't bring herself happiness, I thought it was up to me to do so. The next day, as a general logistician, I confirmed the budget and devised a way to transport the remaining children to the new hospital, which we managed to accomplish. Once it was no longer necessary to worry about the left-behind children, Catherine moved to the new hospital. There, I proposed to her again. "Catherine, for all the sacrifices you make, I will work even harder to protect you." Finally, Catherine said yes through tears. When we got married, we didn't have a ceremony or a party. Instead, we distributed food to the impoverished. Everyone congratulated us, and we felt incredibly happy. To support Catherine, I decided to return to the US alone and seek employment. Since it's rare for both of us to stay in the same region and often in places without internet, I decided to have a base in the US so I could always be reachable and Catherine could return whenever she needed. That's why I re-entered the workforce as an engineer. The companies that Catherine had introduced to me were all positive about the interviews despite my being 40. I chose this major medical equipment manufacturer because they value the activities of Doctors Without Borders and even have a department dedicated to it. The company appreciated my experience and wanted me to contribute immediately as a valuable asset. Over this past year, I've worked hard to meet those expectations. Gradually, I've built good relationships with my colleagues and superiors. I still have issues with Jason, though. "Tom, you've been living apart from your wife since you got married? Don't you think that sounds like a romance scam?" Jason, though a department head, doesn't understand anything about Doctors Without Borders. Apparently, he has a relative who's an executive at the company and, no offense, but he's really just a figurehead. He's not involved in any critical tasks, so he always seems to have more free time than the other employees. So, he tends to be overly curious about my personal life, which is annoying. We met, fell in love, and got married, so it's definitely not a romance scam. No matter how I respond, Jason tries to delve deeper into the conversation. "But your wife is much older, right? And she's a doctor. There's no reason for her to choose you. I can't see any love there." "Well, look, don't worry about us. We have love." Jason looked uninterested in my words and walked away. Exasperated, I turned my attention back to the accumulating paperwork. As I was sorting through documents, Nancy from the next desk spoke to me. "Tom, did you know? Jason's wife is really young. He's about 50, and she's around 30. And yet, he is saying to others that she is already old. He really likes young girls, doesn't he?" Nancy, a 23-year-old, often shares office gossip. "Ah, I see. You get involved with him a lot too, don't you?" When I replied, Nancy made a face of disgust. "I think older people are fine, but someone like Jason is just creepy. It's like he'd be okay with anyone as long as they're young. It's not about age, it should be about what's inside." I wholeheartedly agreed with Nancy's view. No matter Catherine's age, I love her for who she is inside. Last night, I received cheerful photos from Catherine. Currently, she's in a refugee camp in the Middle East, caring for children suffering from malnutrition. In the picture, Catherine was seen laughing, embraced by the local children. Despite their thinness, each child had a sparkle in their eyes, indicating that Catherine's efforts were paying off. That's wonderful. She, embracing many children, seemed just like their mother. It reminded me of what Catherine had once said. I consider myself a second mother to the kids I'm involved with. Even without my own children, I feel like I have children all over the world. I remember nodding in agreement. I opened my email to take another quick look at that picture. Catherine really is a wonderful person. Oops. Sorry. I heard Nancy's apologetic voice, snapping me out of it. Sorry, what happened? Oh, nothing, just that picture. Is she your wife? Sorry, I didn't mean to pry. Nancy pointed at my computer screen as she spoke. My apologies. I shouldn't be doing this at work. Yes, she's my wife. Checking personal emails during work hours, I was not supposed to do that. It's been a full year since we've been married, and it's true I miss her. Wow, your wife has such a beautiful smile. That's a makeup-free photo, right? She's naturally beautiful, and above all, it's a smile that truly comes from the heart. I felt genuinely pleased as Nancy praised Catherine. After watching Nancy gaze at the image for a while, I closed my laptop, saying, right. Okay, back to work. Even though I miss her so badly, that's the way work goes. If I don't work hard here in the States, I won't be able to support Catherine if anything happens. I refocused my mind and concentrated on my job. A few days later, when I arrived at the office, there was a photo on my desk. It featured a young mother and her little child, whom I didn't know. As I was wondering about it, Jason came running over. Tom, good morning. That's a photo of my wife and child. It turned out so well that I thought I'd give one to everyone in the department. So that's Jason's wife. They're quite an age-mismatched couple, as the rumors said. Your wife is beautiful, and your child is adorable. Though unspoken, it seemed to me that Jason's wife was out of his league. Haha, right? My wife used to be a model. Feel free to put it on your desk. Considering your wife can't have children, you probably should have married someone younger. What? I was taken aback by Jason's words. Excuse me, Jason. Could you take that back? Jason looked confused. Huh? I haven't said anything strange. Your wife is beyond childbearing age. You should have married someone younger, that's just the plain truth. My hands trembled. I was so angry that I felt like punching Jason for his incredibly rude comments. How can you say such things? Even without children, my wife and I. That's when Nancy interjected. Jason. That's the abuse of authority. It's also sexual harassment and moral harassment. I looked at Nancy. Nancy seemed angry as well. What? What are you talking about? Where's the harassment in that? You should stop making baseless accusations. Tom, Nancy. You both know my relatives are in the upper management, right? I was worried about losing my job, but I couldn't let Jason's remarks go. As I wondered what to do, Nancy boldly replied. I don't mind if I get transferred or demoted. But you owe Tom an apology. You were disrespectful to him and his wife. I was amazed at Nancy's courage. And I was appalled by Jason's ignorance. Even after Nancy's reprimand, Jason said, children are supposed to come with marriage, aren't they? He married someone who can't have them, so I haven't misspoken at all. There's no reason for me to apologize. Enough of this, give me back the photos. What a terrible morning. With that, Jason snatched the photo from our hands and walked away. I kept apologizing to Nancy, who was still angry, saying I'm sorry and thank you over and over, trying to calm her down. I should have been the one to get angry, but I was grateful that she did it for me. A month passed. Jason blatantly ignored Nancy and me. We didn't mind as it didn't interfere with our work. However, out of the blue, Jason suddenly came to my desk after a month. He was oddly smiling. Tom, for next month's anniversary party, it seems that all the employees with spouses had to bring their other halves to this thing. I remembered reading about the anniversary party in the company newsletter. While I assumed that it was customary for spouses to attend such events, Catherine would likely be unable to come. I don't think my wife will be able to attend due to her busy schedule. To this, Jason smirked and said, "Really? Employees who aspire to advance their careers will make arrangements to attend with their spouses. It's fine if you're not interested in that, but surely, it's not because you're embarrassed to show your wife around, right?" I felt anger building up again for the first time in a month. But before I could react, Jason hummed a tune and returned to his desk. "Don't worry about it, Tom. Your wife is doing important work," Nancy reassured me in a soft voice. I agreed with her. That night, I received surprising news from Catherine. She would be returning home temporarily in 2 weeks. Her current project had just ended, and she had a month off before her next assignment. I was overjoyed. Finally, I would see Catherine again. That's why I had made a place for us in America for a situation like this. During our phone conversations, we excitedly planned where to go and what to eat upon her return. I also mentioned the anniversary party to her. "I will definitely attend with you, Tom." "I'm so happy to have such an opportunity," Catherine positively stated. So, we decided to attend the event as a couple. 2 weeks later, the day of our long-awaited reunion arrived. We spent every day feeling immensely happy. It was, in a sense, our first days of marriage together since getting married. Our time together was blissful. Then, the day of the anniversary party arrived. Catherine rented a classy dress from a rental shop. The dress suited her well. However, since her hair and skin were a bit rough from the sun in Africa, she decided to keep her makeup minimal. As we entered the ballroom at the upscale hotel, about half of the employees were there with their spouses. I proudly walked in with Catherine by my side. However, she seemed a bit off. "Do I look odd? I feel like people are staring at me." I reassured her that she looked fine, but she seemed a bit self-conscious. Then, Jason and his wife appeared. "Hello, Tom. Let me introduce you to my wife, Samantha. Isn't she beautiful?" Jason's wife, being a former model, was indeed the most stunning and well-dressed woman at the event. I began to introduce Catherine as well. Jason has always been very helpful. "This is my wife, Kathy." Before I could finish, Jason interrupted. Oh, my. Is this your mother?" Because Jason deliberately spoke so loudly, colleagues started to gather around us. I responded loudly as well. "No. This is my wife, Catherine." As the crowd quieted down around us, it was Samantha who spoke next. "Wife? I thought she was your mother." Her beautiful face twisted into an ugly sneer. Taking her cue, Jason added, "That's right. Anyone would think she's your mother. With such light makeup and messy hair. Did you bring your parent to the party to stand out, Tom?" Catherine covered her face. I despised the spitefulness of Jason and his wife. The other employees around us were murmuring to each other. "Tom, your mother seems to be crying. Maybe you should take her to the exit?" "Yeah, let's go, Catherine." "You must be uncomfortable, let's step out." I couldn't stand it anymore. "Enough. I've told you that Catherine is my beloved wife. If you continue to insult her, I cannot forgive you or your wife." As I shouted, Jason and his wife continued to smirk maliciously. "Unforgivable, you say? Jason. Wow, quite the spirit you have there, for someone without any backing." At that moment, an elderly man made his way through the crowd to stand before us. His face pale, he exclaimed, "Catherine! It is Catherine, isn't it?" Upon hearing his voice, Catherine looked up and her eyes widened in recognition. "John." While I was still trying to grasp the situation, a woman's voice chimed in. "Excuse me, please let me through." Following the man, a woman who bore a striking resemblance to Catherine approached us. "Oh, Catherine. It really is you. The elderly man, the woman who looked like Catherine, and Catherine themselves embraced and wept together. All I could do was watch. Apart from Jason's trembling voice, Mr. Smith and Ms. Smith. After a good cry, Catherine introduced me to the two. This is my husband, Tom. He's a wonderful man. She then introduced the couple to me. This lady is my twin sister, Susan. And this man is John, the president of this company, her husband. According to the explanation that followed, the woman was indeed Catherine's twin sister, Susan Smith. Apparently, this medical equipment manufacturing company was founded by Catherine and Susan's grandfather. With only the twin sisters in Catherine's generation, they had no choice but to continue the family business through a son-in-law. It's this mature gentleman, John Smith. I felt embarrassed that I had been working for my company's president without knowing his face. Mr. Smith had been treated as a prospective son-in-law by the Smith family early on and seemed to have a mutual affection with Susan. However, Catherine thought her presence would make her sister give up her happiness to her. So she left home right after obtaining her medical license and never returned. Mr. Smith and Susan married and took over the family business, but they had always hoped for Catherine's return. The three of them had always been close. Catherine always gives up her own happiness for others. But finding such a wonderful partner and reuniting like this is truly wonderful. What a beautiful day. Susan cried joyfully, tears streaming down her face. Catherine, with the exact same gesture, also wept with joy. Mr. Smith, with a beaming smile, said to me, "Tom, please take good care of Catherine from now on." Mr. Smith said that to me, and I responded in kind. Then, Mr. Smith sharply glared at the Jason couple and said, "Jason, you said some pretty harsh things to my beloved sister-in-law. Your wife seems lovely, but she clearly doesn't understand the manners required for such an occasion." Jason cringed, but Samantha still glared back at Mr. Smith with frustration. It appeared that Samantha was a wife with a remarkably strong will. Normally, you'd think she was a mother from her look, wouldn't you? What's so funny about that? Despite Jason's attempts to stop her, Samantha continued to talk without acknowledging her fault. It's most important for a woman to be beautiful. The most beautiful woman is the most respected. So, even if it's Mr. Smith's wife, I am more important than Susan, and of course, more important than Catherine. I don't know what kind of life she has led, but I think Samantha has grown into an adult missing some essential life lessons. Being beautiful is a fortunate stroke of birth. Being born into a good family in a country as free as America is also fortunate. But, I have met many people who are not so fortunate. People who have nothing to eat today, no water to drink, and children who have no place to learn. People who want to help them, spend their own time and money. I believe the most beautiful people are those with beautiful hearts. People who can smile even when they can't see the future. People who rejoice in the happiness of others as if it were their own. People who can share what they have. People who can give up something important to them. The wife I chose is that kind of person. That's why I don't think Samantha is very beautiful. Samantha kept talking. Hey, you always say it too. It's a good opportunity, so say it. Mr. Smith, please promote this man to be an executive right now. He has relatives in executive positions, right? Finally, Jason hid his face and crouched down in embarrassment. Mr. Smith heard this and said, "Brad, what is this about? We forbid nepotism in our company." Then, a man who seemed to be Jason's relative stepped forward, trembling, and answered, "Oh, well, you see, there's no way he's getting promoted." Samantha shouted angrily. "What?" As things tend to pile up when they start going wrong, another person came forward. It was Nancy. Nancy stood before Catherine and greeted her. "I have always been indebted to Tom. My name is Nancy Emmons. I work under my father's maiden name because I don't want to use connections. I didn't even know that Nancy was Mr. Smith's daughter." Next, Nancy said to Mr. Smith, "It's not just my opinion but the whole department's. Jason has been harassing us terribly. I have recordings, so Dad, please listen to them later. Even our manager lacks the necessary authority." At this, Samantha looked demonic and yelled, "Don't you dare butt in, young lady. A father who listens to that kind of thing is just as bad. My husband deserves to be the next president. Then Nancy, with a calm face, stood before Samantha and said, "Your husband is always making advances towards me because I'm young. There are plenty of other young female employees he has harassed. I've recorded that too, so you should listen to it." Samantha was left speechless this time. Her face crumbled, and she looked at Jason. I was also overwhelmed by the sudden overflow of facts and couldn't say anything, just standing there. Only the lively classical music continued to echo in the venue. In such an awkward atmosphere, the first to move was Catherine. Catherine approached Samantha and patted her back. And then, she says in a calm tone to Mr. and Mrs. Jason, "You're very beautiful. Jason cherishes you very much, and so do you, right? You were just too worried about your husband and said too much. You should talk it over and reconcile soon." Despite the mean things that were said, the way she spoke so forgivingly made her seem like an angel to me. Even though she had every right to be the angriest. Catherine's kindness gradually restored a sense of calm to the venue. From the crowd, a few people approached Catherine and apologized. "I'm sorry for staring so intently. You look so much like Mrs. Smith that it made me uncomfortable." Other colleagues also tried to speak well of Jason, saying things like, "He has his good points too. He's so easygoing in the department. It's comforting." Even Samantha herself said something surprisingly virtuous to Jason. "Did I ask too much of you? I just said it because you listened to me. I'm sorry. Please don't hate me." I was once again amazed by the purity of the energy Catherine possesses. In the project, too, when Catherine is around, even anxious children and adults seem reassured. Even in situations where there's no guarantee of food for tomorrow, somehow it feels like everything will be okay. Catherine may have everything: family background, money, good looks, but even without all that, I believe she has the most beautiful heart in the world, and I must live in a way that does not disgrace such a wife. Thanks to Catherine, the awkward party was salvaged. And we were able to conclude the celebration of the foundation anniversary without further issue. After the party, Catherine and I had planned a short trip using the remaining days of her stay in America. But I cancelled it. I thought it was best for Catherine to spend the remaining days with Mr. Smith and her sister. When I told her, Catherine unusually made a selfish request. I was really looking forward to it. I felt happy but firmly responded, "Mr. Smith and your sister were probably looking forward to seeing you even more than I was." Honestly, I was really looking forward to the trip too. But Catherine and I will be together for a long time to come. I have plenty of time to spend with Catherine. So, giving up a few days to Mr. Smith and her sister is no big deal. I decided to give happiness to Catherine when we got married. Catherine's happiness is my happiness as well. Catherine thanked me a lot and enjoyed her remaining days with the Smiths. I was invited many times too, but honestly, as a mere employee, I didn't have the courage to spend private time with Mr. Smith. Gradually, I hope I can also join them. After Catherine went back to a conflict zone, there were changes in my department. First, Jason suddenly started learning about Doctors Without Borders. No one pointed out how strange it was that he hadn't learned this before. We all quietly watched over him. Then, Nancy quit the company. She's going back to university to pursue a medical degree. I want to become a cool woman like Catherine. It's fine for the company. I have a younger brother. Mr. Smith and Susan also said they would support Nancy in her new path. I thought the bold and strong Nancy would surely be a great doctor. On a day when a pleasant breeze was blowing, I looked up at the sky from the company rooftop and said in my heart, "Catherine, your influence is incredible. I will keep striving harder and harder."